And welcome to the Geneva City Council meeting, July 1st, 2020. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come before you. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and I'd like to ask Councilor Galanese to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands, under God, indivisible,
With liberty.
and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Could you please call the roll?
Councillor Noon,
here.
Councillor Galanese,
Here.
Councillor Burrell,
Here.
Councillor Peeler,
He just logged in.
okay. Councillor Regan,
Here.
Councillor Camera,
Here.
Councillor Salamandra,
Here.
Councillor Pruitt,
Here.
Mayor Valentino.
Here. Thank
And
you
I've
very
got you,
much.
Councillor Peeler. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on our agenda, we have a founder update by our city manager. I hope she's there.
Sage, I can't hear you. Don't see her.
Okay. We'll come back to the foundry update. I'm going to jump to the certificate of appreciation, if that's okay. Here we go.
Mayor, can I just ask a question?
Yes, sir.
You remember we talked, we maybe wanted to work on the order?
Yeah.
Is it time to do it, or we should do it a little bit later?
The time to amend the agenda would be just before regular business, so we will do that right after the consideration in the meeting minutes. Okay, Counselor?
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. So I have a proclamation I'd like to read. Whereas Trina Newton has been the superintendent of the Geneva City School District since January 2012, where her years of service have been marked by exemplary dedication to the best of interest of the school district. And whereas during her tenure, she has led and made decisions with our Geneva youth as a top priority, and she guided the school board to make informed decisions that benefited our community, as well as ensuring that all laws, rules, and regulations related to education were enforced. Whereas Mrs. Newton recognized the power of innovation and collaboration as drivers to change within a school system and brought forward new programs such as multiple language programs offered from pre-K through high school, nurtured professional development of training to inspire educators to expand their knowledge, and supported community partnerships and opportunities for students to share their research, ideas, and products with the community. Whereas Miss Newton empowered staff, students, and the community to work together to assist students in succeeding in school and leading lives of consequence. Whereas Miss Newton helped launch the Geneva Education Foundation with Bernie Lynch and Mark Guerin, she presented the Officer Royal with the inaugural Youth Advocate of the Year Award for Geneva 2030. And she showed outstanding leadership through the global pandemic and subsequent virtual teaching and learning. And whereas Miss Newton lived in our community and joined community organizations like Geneva 2030, Success for Geneva's Children, Rotary Club, and the Finger Lakes Health Community Advisory Committee, among others. She cheered on students at athletic events, school plays, concerts, and more, and truly became a Geneva Panther. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Steve Valentino, Mayor of the City of Geneva, do hereby extend my deepest gratitude to Trina Newton for her service to Geneva and her work in advancing the mission of the Geneva City School District. I would like to congratulate her on her many years of service and offer our best wishes to her for much success and happiness in the future. I'd also like to welcome our new superintendent, Dr. Patricia Garcia. We're looking forward to working with her. Okay. And if you're standing here, I'd pass the proclamation to her. So I'd like to go back, Sage, if you're there, I'd like to go back to the foundry update.
I'll start off with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, their updates. First on remedial design. Design drawings were completed for 4 properties on Wadsworth Street that New York State DEC anticipates will be cleaned up during late summer or fall 2020. The New York State DEC's engineer will meet with the owners to review the plans for each property. Remedial designs are in progress on the west side of Genesee Street opposite the park. New York State DEC anticipates cleanup activities will be performed at these properties beginning in late summer or early fall. Initial property surveying activities were conducted at 28 properties along Exchange, Wadsworth, and Middle Streets in preparation for soil sampling to be conducted at these properties during the summer, fall of 2020. Additional surveying and soil sampling is also anticipated at up to 34 properties along Genesee, Geneva, Lewis, and Tillman Streets during the 2020 or 2021 construction season. The New York State for remedial construction, I'll move on to that part. Their contractor conducted additional restoration activities at 73, 77, 81, 87 to 89, 91, 97, and 99 Genesee Street, and at 5, 9, and 15 Genesee Park Place. Excavation and backfilling activities were completed at 17 and 25 Genesee Park Place. Final soil grading and sod installation was completed at the St. Francis de Sales Church block. Excavation and backfilling activities were completed in the front yard of 19 Lafayette Avenue and the right-of-way along Lafayette Avenue at St. Michael's Orthodox Church, 98 Genesee Street. Excavation and backfilling activities will be conducted at properties along the north side of Lewis Street, east of Genesee Park, beginning in mid-July. And lastly, landscaping items were installed at additional properties on Genesee Street, Lafayette Avenue, and State Street that were remediated in 2019. And additional properties from that time will be completed this month. For our Foundry site remediation, the restoration and the remediation is complete and will continue leveling of the area or any overgrowth maintenance. And lastly, for resident outreach, Food Link's curbside mobile market for fresh vegetables and fruits will officially begin on July 17th. They had a little pop-up this last weekend that Jessica got the word out for, and they'll have strict guidelines, the COVID-19 guidelines to follow. They'll be at Salvation Army, Elmcrest Apartments, and Seneca Street Apartments, and the time details are to come. The Farmers Market voucher program is up and running with our Wednesday market from 3 to 7 p.m. That's a new time this year. And the voucher program for the dog park is available again for residents waiting for remediation. And of most importance, you can reach Jessica at gnrc@geneva.ny.us or 315-759-7354. This is goes up on our website, so you can also read in more detail as you wish. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next item on the agenda is a public hearing for the CDBG block grant. Residents wishing to comment should have emailed the city clerk, Lori Guinan. Lori, did we have anybody email about the public hearing?
Not.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to do 2 more items on the agenda, and then we'll talk about an agenda amendment. So next on the list for our agenda, we have a presentation from Adam Fryer of the People's Peaceful Protest of Geneva.
Hello, hello. Can you see me, hear me?
Yep,
Yes.
we got you, Adam.
All right, perfect. So I will jump right in. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. It's a little dark here, but so let me just start by introducing myself. My name is Adam Fryer, as you said. I am a Geneva resident on Pleasant Street. I grew up here. I've been here all my life. I experienced police misconduct at the age of 16, where I was put on the hood of a police car and searched for no reason on Genesee Street. So that kind of tells you why I am so passionate about the issues that I will be talking about here in a little bit. They affect me very personally. So I have volunteered a great deal of my time engaging with every age, ability, race, creed in my community. Through my business facilitating drum circle workshops, I have a bachelor's in psychology and philosophy from the University of Buffalo. I've worked in human services fields since graduating college in 2011. everything from foster care to developmental disabilities and the Office of Mental Health. I currently am working towards a master's in social work, and all that to say that I have been trusted with carrying the mantle and the message of the People's Peaceful Protest here in Geneva, which is why I'm here. So let's introduce the People's Peaceful Protest. They're a grassroots organization. There is no one leader to this organization. It is a community effort. We are not anti-police. We are not anti-police. We are not anti-police. Want to get that on the record. Organizations, or actually the organizers and supporters, come from every ward, every walk of human life in all of our surrounding area. We are not paid to protest. We are not paid to protest. We are not paid to protest. Despite some counselors at large beliefs, we are not influenced by any one counselor and are acting purely out of the interest of the people. We have and will continue to COVID safely march through the streets of Geneva, host teach-ins, and fight for systemic changes that the community feels need to be addressed. That includes, but is not limited to, introducing legislation and holding our local institutions and politicians accountable. All of this with abundant transparency. So let's talk about some other parts of this. So our drafted resolutions. So they were drafted by feedback from the community, which was obtained by feedback that was gathered at our gatherings, during our rallies and marches, on social media, phone calls, and texts. They were refined into a list of 8 demands and set up an online petition, which has over 1,600 signatures. Very intelligent and talented members of our community compiled pages and pages of research, which were sent to council on numerous occasions. Further refined our demands into research-backed resolutions you will see today. So our attempts to reach council, our initial email was sent on June 17th with a petition and demands from the community. Scattered emails and calls with counselors throughout the weeks. Sent the counselors sent our resolutions to counselors on Tuesday, June 23rd. Several conversations followed. Promises by counselors to review, sponsor, and provide feedback on the resolutions. After speaking with counselors over the past weekend and watching Monday's work session, it is clear that some counselors still hadn't even read some of the resolutions, at least in their entirety. Over the past month, only City Councilwomen Laura Salamandra and Jan Reagan attended any of our marches and events or listened to what the protesters had to say. So basically, even though we were consistently, there were hordes of people peacefully protesting in the streets and disrupting traffic Monday through Friday for a month. If it weren't for me constantly calling, emailing, and showing up at your doorstep, most of you wouldn't have even acknowledged us. So talk about our attempts to reach out to the NAACP and the African American Men's Association. So we attempted to reach both the presidents of these organizations since the first day of the petition that was on change.org. We spoke with both presidents on Juneteenth at the rally that we hosted. And I actually provided a physical copy to the president of the African American Men's Association, followed by multiple calls and promises to get back to me later. This past Sunday, I finally convinced the president of the African American Men's Association to receive our resolutions by email. So that's the African American Men's Association. Sunday evening, someone from the NAACP called me to let me know that they loved our resolutions. They think they're all great. They're wonderful ideas that match their platform to a T, almost pretty much, but they will not support them. Then Monday, through the small chain of the city grapevine, our members were made aware that the NAACP has requested that council table all of the people's demands. So lastly, before we get to the resolutions themselves, I want to dispel some comments that were made on Monday's meeting. So number one is that we're going too fast. Most of these resolutions are commitments to just starting a conversation. Just starting a conversation. One more time, just starting a conversation. These are not revolutionary ideas. and they are actually modest compared to other resolutions on your agenda today. And I just want to read a quote by Martin Luther King. For years now, I have heard the word wait. It rings in the ear of every Negro with piercing familiarity. This wait has almost always meant never. We must come to see with one of our distinguished jurists that justice too long delayed is justice denied. So let's talk about the second thing that came up in Monday's work session. So the procedure was not followed. We reached out to everyone we could along the way. We asked for collaboration. We received overwhelming support from our petition, compiled currently 17 pages of summarized research, refined our demands into resolutions, and submitted it to council. We've done everything we could to include everyone and follow the process given the urgency of this issue of police misconduct, which the American Public Health Association describes as a public health crisis. Now, the other thing that was brought up during Monday's work session, which is using the NAACP as cover. This is very difficult for me to say and accept as a young person of color, but the NAACP does not carry the views of all Black people, especially young Black people. We have the utmost respect for all of the work that they have done, but they are not a monolith. There is a serious generational gap in membership within their organization, which Linda Ortiz from the Department of Justice, who I've spoken to many times in the last week, told me she has explicitly pointed out to our city managers and the NAACP multiple times over the last decade. All of our resolutions are for the benefit and safety of all Geneva people, but they will have a disproportionately positive impact on the lives of Black and brown youth. So why are they silencing us? The young people of this generation cannot and will not wait for the older, slower institutions to weigh in on how to keep us and future generations safe, especially when these resolutions are common sense accountability and not just an NAACP priority issue. In short, we can speak for ourselves. So now let's talk about these resolutions. So number one, there will be an amendment or a substitution. Well, actually we're withdrawing one and we're substituting another, but the resolution revising policy related to the school resource officer position, we are retracting that. Merely, it called for an annual review of the SRO position, which Mr. Arroyo is currently in, a man who's very lauded in the community for his work there. There was actually a lot of misinformation about this. There was petitions going around and some counselors actually beat this drum that we were attempting to remove the SRO position and disarm all cops. This is not true, and we've made a public statement about that. But we would like to say we want to thank Counselor Camera for making a clear distinction between his resolution and ours in email to his constituents. So resolution number two, requesting and revising data metrics and reporting from Geneva Police Department. We just want to set up a report from the chief, an annual report from the chief of police on how things are going. We need to be able to take the temperature of the PD. This would include frequency of calls, response time, and length of time on scene, use of force, number and type of officers responding to calls, and other metrics deemed useful and necessary by council be provided as part of an annual report and available on periodic basis as may requested by council. I'm surprised we haven't been doing that already. Resolution established, the next resolution, establishing a timeline and process for revising Geneva Police Department's body camera policy. This sets up a task force to review the body cam policy that already exists and make recommendations for revisions. I don't know how that is moving too fast to ask a group of people to look at the policy and see what might be wrong and offer suggestions, but I'm open to that conversation, but I think that's also kind of a no-brainer. The next resolution, amending the Geneva Police Department use of force policy. We have actually gone through the GPD's use of force policy and compared it with the research which we provided to council and best practices and suggested revisions. Our revisions are modest, and personally, I feel we could have went a lot further. These revisions include clearly stating the continuum of force within the policy, enforcing documentation whenever an officer brandishes his weapon, not just under certain circumstances, accounts for policy changes when a police accountability board is enacted and requires training on these very important policies more than just once a year. Yes, currently our police force is only required to review their use of force policy once a year. While working for OPWDD, the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, I was required to have an annual training on physical interventions and multiple mandatory refresher trainings throughout the year while making minimum wage. We hold caretakers to a higher standard than we do our police when it comes to physically intervening with the people that we serve. All the research we found showed a direct correlation between strict use of force policy and decreased incidents of misconduct or police shootings. The next resolution, protecting whistleblowers within the employ of the city of Geneva. This we offered a substitution because we made an amendment. In addition, just to reinforce this policy, whistleblower protection is already a New York State law, and the policy is already written. We could not locate this policy on the city website, which is against the law for a public institution. This is a no-brainer. We are asking council to follow the law laid out by New York State to provide protections for city employees, especially officers, to report misconduct without fear of repercussion. Just recently, there was a police officer in Buffalo who reported misconduct and was fired. We must protect our good cops with sound policy. The next resolution is banning the execution of no-knock warrants with the city of Geneva. So Breonna Taylor, I'm sure everybody has heard that story at this point, but if you haven't, then I'll give you the brief. Breonna Taylor received a knock. Well, there was no knock at the door. Police entered the home. The occupants, Breonna Taylor and her boyfriend, were startled. They were not supposed to be the targets of this search. Actually, the target was 10 miles away. The officers began shooting, so Breonna Taylor's boyfriend began firing back with his own personal registered weapon. The officers ended up killing Breonna Taylor, shooting her multiple times through the wall. So we think, I think from that story, it's even hard to tell. We need to take action, which many other cities are taking action immediately. The number of no-knock raids has increased from 3,000 in 1981 to more than 50,000 in 2005. These warrants unnecessarily endanger citizens and our police. There have been cases where burglars have robbed homes by pretending to be officers with a no-knock warrant. There have been many cases where armed homeowners, believing that they are being invaded, have shot at officers, resulting in deaths on both sides. This is a policy tied to the war on drugs, which began in the 1970s, which has led to the unjust deaths and imprisonment of countless people of color. But we don't have time to get into all of that. So the next resolution is establishing procedure and timeline for police department budget for police department budgeting committee. This is where we got lumped in with other councilors' resolutions of defunding the police, where another resolution is calling for cuts connected with two other officers who are currently in the academy. This is completely separate from that. But again, some councilors and people kind of beat that drum and didn't separate us from that. So the Geneva City Council hereby, just reading the excerpt from the actual resolution, the Geneva City Council hereby commits to establishing a police budget advisory board for the purpose of examining line item expenditures and associated policy priorities within the Geneva Police Department, appropriations, and be it further resolved that said board shall be convened no later than July 31st, 2020, shall be represented by the demographic of the community at large, and shall provide recommendations to the city council in advance of September budget hearing. So again, it is not revolutionary. It is common sense stuff that we should have been doing, and it should have been happening all along, and is a first step towards efficiently allocating funds of our police department if we find it necessary. We need somebody to look at it, not just say, we're just going to make cuts, wild cuts. So that's the people's opinion on it. And at large, we understand both sides. We don't want to cut. We want to make sure our police have the money that they need to do their job, but we also don't want to just continue to fatten that pig, as it were. Holy cow. But the next resolution, ensuring diversity and standards for Geneva Community Compact. It is the common consensus that Community Compact Steering Committee does not currently accurately present or represent the diversity of our beautiful city. The city funds the steering committee's budget, so we feel the city has a responsibility to set forth standards of representation. So an excerpt from that resolution: the composition of the Geneva Community Compact be expanded to include representatives from the People's Peaceful Protest, from the Spanish-speaking community, and from direct members or representatives of agencies serving particularly vulnerable populations. Be it further resolved that the selection for the continued membership on the Geneva Community Compact require a commitment on regular attendance at meetings, engagement in topics of discussion and research in between meetings, and an understanding of the unique and important role that the compact should play in guiding and assisting the efforts to reforming policing in the city of Geneva. So moving on to the next and the final resolution. So this is establishing a public hearing for the first reading of a local law amending the city charter to establish a police accountability board. So this, every couple of years, Geneva PD receives a serious allegation of misconduct, usually settled for tens of thousands of dollars. None have resulted in GPD officers being officially fired, and most ended up with officers on paid leave and earning raises. I would go through the list of cases, but I assume counselors, you should already be aware of all these cases over the last decade. But I will gladly go through them during the question and answer portion at your request. Another comment that was made about this at the work session is that these are illegal. There is a lot of information that refutes that. It is not illegal. And actually, Rochester has a police accountability board, which the resolution and the sample or the draft of the ordinance that we have submitted to council is modeled after. Judge Ark recently struck down their power of disciplinary actions towards officers, which is still in litigation and is expected to be reinstated. The judge did not say that the board cannot review, discuss, or even suggest disciplinary action. He just said that the Police Accountability Board can't carry out discipline. Enabling legislation, at least that we have written and sent to you for review, only suggests discipline as outlined by the charter under power of the police chief and the city manager, and consistent with state law. A disciplinary matrix, so a graph, if this happens, this is the discipline. A disciplinary matrix developed by the board with the chief and city manager is standard practice. This is cut and dry. So I work for OPWDD, the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities. In 2012, an expose came out where they uncovered that unions were shuffling around employees who were committing atrocious abuses to people with disabilities. So what the governor's response was to enact the Justice Center, which was a call center and would hold people accountable and do investigations when there was serious allegations of abuse. I was a part of that rollout in 2013, and it hurt. It hurt for a bit. We stumbled. People who had been there for years said they were going to quit and it'd never be the same and we'd never be able to serve the people. But employees and especially the vulnerable people that we serve are better off for these protections now. It works. None of that bad stuff happened. And that's the exact same thing that will happen with a police accountability board. It will suck for a while, but they will get used to it and we will all be better for it. And all we are calling for with this particular resolution, all you would vote on today is a public hearing, which allows the public comment and discussion by all stakeholders on a single topic. You can hear everyone out. You can call for multiple public hearings. If it's voted yes by a supermajority, then it will have to be read again and voted up. And then you have to read it again, and then you vote it up again in order for it to become a public law. So we are just asking for you to start the process, to not kick the can down the line, and to just say, we are going to dedicate a day this month that anybody, any stakeholders that want to discuss this can come together. And we don't need to decide on that day exactly what we're going to do. We can decide to have another public hearing until we hash this out. So to dispel any misinterpretation of that, this is the #1 demand of the people because we have wanted it for almost 9 years and we haven't even been given the opportunity to discuss it. Why would anyone want to delay a public hearing? The fact that we have to ask that question is kind of disturbing. There's literally no excuse to vote no or table this. If you vote no or table, you are saying you do not want to have an open, transparent discussion with everyone in the city of Geneva involved. That's what this does, if you read it. If the people do not see movement on these common sense conversation starter resolutions, be assured the community will be in contact with the governor's office and state legislatures. We will ensure reforms meet the standards of our community and those that are not represented by local institutions. I am not a politician. I speak directly from my heart, and these are important issues that have demanded our government's attention for a long, long time. And I promise you that I have always been honest with you, transparent, spoken the direct words of the people that sent me here today. I want to give you a quote by Frederick Douglass. Where justice is denied, where poverty is enforced, where ignorance prevails, and where any one class is made to feel that society is an organized conspiracy to oppress, rob, and degrade them, neither person nor property will be safe. We have always been peaceful. Last night, a gun was pointed at a Black man on North Street and was told Black Lives Matter this. The ignorance is starting to prevail, counselors. If you do not move forward with at least a special session to discuss the Police Accountability Board, then you are putting everyone in this city at risk. If something happens after today, that's your responsibility. We did our part. Lastly, while I was working from home today, my mother called to check up on me. And with tears in her voice, she said, "Be careful." That feeling is something only the mother of a Black son feels in the United States. It should not be this way anymore. Let's lead the way in police reform and stop kicking the can like we always do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Next on our agenda is consideration of meeting minutes. We have June 1st, 2020, June 3rd, 2020, and June 22nd, 2020. Do I have a motion? And I'm asking for that verbally because it's tough to see everybody.
I'll make the motion.
That was,
So afternoon.
okay, second,
So move.
Councilor Brooks.
Yeah, I don't.
Oh, he's in his meeting. Or he's in his office.
Lori, please call the roll. Lori.
I hate Zoom.
Mhm.
The older guys
Counselor
like,
Noon,
Aye.
Counselor Galanese, Counselor Burrell,
Aye.
Counselor Peeler,
Aye.
Counselor Regan, Counselor Camera,
Aye.
Counselor Salamandra,
Aye.
Counselor Pruitt,
Aye.
Mayor Valentino.
Aye. Thank you
Motion
very much.
carried.
So before we move on to public comment, I believe there's an interest to amend the agenda, and just to let everybody know how that works. Any amendment to the agenda needs to be brought forward, and it needs a vote by the whole of council, and it needs to be a majority vote in order to pass that change to the agenda. And who is interested in making an amendment to the agenda? Councilor Camera, please. Ken, you're muted, Ken. You're muted. Ken, you're muted. Ken, you're muted.
Yeah, okay.
Thank
Here I am. I'm working on it. You know, I got two screens going and my cursor's in one place. Sometimes I have to look for it. The reason I'd like to propose that we reorganize the agenda is that the first order of business for unfinished business is consideration of the chicken ordinance. And just in light of everything that's going on, I'd like to either put it at the end of the agenda or move it off to the next meeting. We have, Lori, I think, said we have 15 people to hear from.
50.
Comment?
50,
50.
50.
We have 50?
That's,
Yes.
yeah, that's an hour and 30 minutes, 2 hours and 30 minutes.
Well,
will
then,
I
okay,
will second moving that to next month.
thank you. Thank you very much. And then I have one more order, a request to change.
Counselor, can you
Well,
put
let's,
both
okay,
together?
let's do this one first then,
All right.
if you want to, Mayor.
Lori, can you please call the roll?
I can. Counselor Camera,
Aye.
Counselor Salamandra,
Aye.
Counselor Pruitt,
Nay.
Counselor Noon,
Aye.
Counselor Galanese,
You're muted, Frank.
Counselor Burrell,
Aye.
Counselor Peeler,
Aye.
Counselor Regan,
Aye.
Mayor Valentino.
Nay, I'm looking forward to vote no on that one. Next,
Okay.
Counselor Camera.
Motion approved.
The other suggestion I'd like to make, if I could, is I see, so that way we would listen to the public comments from everybody and then we'd move right to new business. Is that correct? That's what we do, right?
Unfinished business, then new business.
Yeah, so now we put unfinished business out of this, so we go to new business. I think,
Yes, sir.
I believe that, okay, Council, I believe the resolution that I offered is the third, is item C on this, and I'd like to push it down beyond the resolutions that are offered by the Black Lives Matter and the People's Peaceful Protest of Geneva group. I'd like to put my resolutions after that because there's some overlap, and I think that I would be satisfied taking those one at a time, and that might save us time on even considering any of mine.
So you'd like to move resolution 29-2020.
Correct.
Yeah.
28 28-2020.
28-2020.
Oh, and 29, no, 29, no, not 29, 2020. Okay.
We're moving item C down to past item M. Do we have a second on that? Second by Councilor Regan. Clerk, any discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
I think Councilor Pruitt wanted to say something.
Yes.
We've got about 4 of these. Are we gonna move everyone down the marina and also the glyphosate and everything that's not relative to Black Lives, or are we gonna put everything toward the end? Accept those? That'd be fine with
Well,
me.
well, it looks like the pesticides and the marina are at the end anyway.
Well, we're not gonna get to any of these things.
Well, we might not, but so we're going to be considering in
Put them off because the meeting's gonna go past 4 hours, you know that. Okay, though, that's what we
they're
want.
at the end. We can stop and pause and do what we have to do then.
Well, then I'd say we should have what Mr. Fryer had mentioned, maybe a special session after this, if there's that much work to do, if we got things to get done.
Right.
But, we can talk about that afterward, but I would like to get through several subjects rather than one.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't want to lose the marina vote. I want us to have a vote on it and put that to bed. If people want to stop it, great. If they don't, done. I think
So let's be efficient with our discussions and our voting.
yes.
Okay. So now we're going to be efficient. Let's call the roll, please.
Camera,
Yes, aye.
Counselor Salamandra,
Aye.
Counselor Pruitt,
Efficiently, aye.
Counselor Noon,
Aye.
Counselor Galanese, Counselor
Frank,
Burrow,
you muted?
Aye.
Counselor Peeler,
Aye.
Counselor Regan,
Aye.
Mayor Valentino.
Nay, I'm for getting it done.
Okay.
Okay.
Motion
Anything
carried.
else that wanted to be amended? Oh, Sage, go ahead.
Not an amendment. We increased our Zoom capacity, but it's not allowing us to go over 100. So my request for anyone who's not speaking for public comment and has the ability to jump over to the Finger Lakes TV link, which is on our agenda, but also https fingerlakestv.org/live/ I really would love for you to do it. We want to make sure Lori's been monitoring and hearing from public comment people. We want to make sure everyone that signed up that wanted to speak and not be read by staff get on. So if you have the ability to switch over, that would be great. And people are already doing it. That's great. And Adam's on with Zoom trying to figure out why our capacity wasn't increased with what we had. So again, if you can, https://fingerlakestv.org/live. You can also Google it. So thank you so much.
Okay. Any other amendments?
I have
Counselor
one.
Salamandra.
So I put forward a number of resolutions tonight, all directly sent to me from the People's Peaceful Protest, Black Lives Matter Geneva. They have requested that that they would like to drop the amendment 36 or resolution 36 because they feel it's better suited for the school board, and to amend resolution 38. So that's been submitted. I'm not sure if you need me to read the new language of 38, but those are both of the things I'd like to do.
Amendment to the resolution has to happen during the resolution once it's on the floor.
Sure.
Taking one resolution off the amendment can happen right now if you get a second. Do we have a second for that? Counselor Camera? Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Salamandra,
Aye.
Counselor Pruitt,
Which one are we taking off? K?
The school resource officer, yes.
Okay.
Hey.
thank you. Counselor Noon,
Aye.
Counselor Galanese,
Aye.
Counselor Burrow,
Aye.
Counselor Peeler,
Aye.
Counselor Regan,
Aye.
Counselor Camera,
Aye.
Mayor Valentino.
Nay.
Motion
Thank you very
carried.
much. Any other amendments? Okay, let's get to business here. So now we're going into public comment. And since my list is a little bit challenged, I'm going to rely on our city clerk to help me pull people forward. As she mentioned, there is 50 people signed up for public comment. Normally, and since we were polite, this council was polite, we didn't leave public comment to the end. We're letting you speak at the beginning of the meeting, or sort of the beginning of the meeting. I would like to be as efficient as possible with public comment. So as you're entering into public comment, we would like you to stay in queue and be ready to talk. We would like you to stick to 3 minutes or less. We would really appreciate or less. And if somebody before you has said the same thing you said, please just echo that comment. You don't have to repeat it all over again. We will get the point, I can guarantee you. Some pretty intelligent people on this council, even though that might be a bone of discussion with many people. Councilor Peeler, you're raising your hand for a reason. Speak, please.
Just want to remind everyone to go to the bathroom or get a drink because 50 comments times 3 is almost 2.5 hours.
It is 2.5 hours. Yep. Okay. So, City Clerk, can you please
Hey.
read off the first 3 names?
Yep. First, we have Maddie McDowell, Kellen Stanfield, and Virgil Slade, and all of them will be speaking on their own behalf.
Okay. So please.
Maddie
first,
McDowell,
Maddie McDowell, let her in, or him in, I'm sorry.
her.
Her. Is Maddie online?
I think she was having trouble connecting to the Zoom.
So just can we recycle
I'll
her
move
to
her.
a different
Yep.
position, please?
I'll move her to the bottom. Yep.
Thank you.
How about Kellen Stanfield?
Yeah, well, yeah. My name's Kellen Stanfield, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak. And I'm a Ward 5 resident. I've been living in Geneva for about 3 years now. And I just that I endorse all the resolutions being offered by the people's peaceful protest, and I think Adam very well by himself articulated their view on those resolutions. So I'd rather talk about some couple of other issues, mainly to do with the power of investigation of the city council. So I just wanted, it's been 30 days since the peaceful protests have started. In these 30 days,
Kellen, you're muted. Kellen, you're muted.
Okay, sorry, yes, I got a note there to start my video, sorry.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and they've been several members of this community giving stories of being intimidated by police, some hostile contact from police. And there's also several documented cases of severe police misconduct. This council itself has been seated for 6 months. So I'm wondering, has the council used its power of investigation to investigate the conduct of the police department or any police officers? And if not, I would like to hear why the council has decided not to. The council has access to all records and papers kept by the police department. In addition, the council has the power to compel the production of, quote, other evidence as written in the city charter. So I'm asking, will the council compel the police department to disclose demographic data pertaining to all police resident interactions so that we can examine the disparate impact of police activity? And the final comment I want to make is, I've heard, I'm not sure what's true, but I've heard that some of the leaders of the people's peaceful protests are being encouraged, or maybe even told that it's required that they have in-person dialogue with the chief of police and police officers. And I'm just wondering, given that the people's peaceful protests and many of the organizers feel that the police department threatens their lives, does the council believe it's appropriate to ask them to have in-person interaction with the chief of police? And those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Kellen. Virgil Slade. Virgil, are you on?
I am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening to the City Council. I am Virgil Slade. I live in South Main, and I am the professor of history at HWS. I mention this as today you have an opportunity to make history, to etch your names indelibly on the history of our city, our state, and this country. And this is an opportunity created for you by the people's peaceful protest. As the name attests, This is a peaceful movement of the people, the very people that you have taken an oath to serve. The people's peaceful protest draws its constituency across the racial and class divides of our city. It is Geneva at its most beautiful, its most caring, its most inclusive. It is a movement where mostly young people, but with a healthy sprinkling of of more seasoned Genevans, who are making sacrifices to make Geneva a better place for all of us to live in. They have taken to our streets to express their disgust and intolerance of the repeated and largely unpunished episodes of police misconduct that has historically plagued our beautiful city. Tonight you have an opportunity to express your disgust, your intolerance. Tonight you have an opportunity to say no more, to say that it is enough, to say that the buck stops here. The proposals set before you tonight share one important and pivotal commonality: the desire for increased transparency in terms of how the city functions and how it is policed. Only those who have something to hide fear transparency. These proposals make clear to the City Council that the public trust in those who run and supposedly protect the city has been compromised. Today, you are offered with an opportunity to regain some of that trust. You have been entrusted with the welfare of all the people of Geneva. Tonight, show us in no uncertain terms that this trust has not been misplaced. The preponderance of evidence is as overwhelming as it is damning. To do nothing, to delay, to say, let's wait, is to make yourselves complicit with the unlawful and inhumane actions perpetrated by local law enforcement. This complicity means that when the next episode of police brutality takes place in Geneva, that you have to share in the blame. And everyone, including yourselves, will know it. If you say Black Lives Matter, prove it tonight. If you say all lives matter, prove it tonight. You have been granted an opportunity to etch your name deeply into the history of our city. So I beg of you to seize it. Seize this day. Justice delayed is justice denied. City councillors of Geneva, I believe in you until you make it so that I cannot. Thank you.
Thank you. Lori, the next three, please.
Jessica Farrell, Janet Gale, and Stephen Cottrell. And Jessica and Janet will be speaking, and I will be reading Stephen's comment.
Thank you very much. Jessica, are you there?
Hi, I'm here, yes. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Jess Farrell, and I live on South Main. I want to speak tonight in support of all of the resolutions written by the People's Peaceful Protest and submitted by Councillor Salamandra. After listening to Monday's work session and speaking with various councillors, I want to respond to some of what I've been hearing. First, I would like to address this notion that we need to hear both sides. Looking at these resolutions and what they collectively address, I can't figure out what these two sides are. Those who want the police to treat everyone equally and those who don't. Surely not. I know that nobody here would be advocating that we listen to those who want inequality. That would be racist. So maybe those two sides are those who support the police and those who don't. Except that this also doesn't hold water, since the protesters here in Geneva support the police as long as they function in a way that treats everyone with respect. That is not anti-police. So what this says to me is that this is not about two sides. It's about if you support the particularities of these resolutions or not. So if we could turn to their actual substance instead of harping about divisions and sides, which we spent most of Monday doing, maybe we could get somewhere. Which brings me to my next point. I think all of you would have more to say about the substance of these resolutions if you had had a hand in bringing them forward. I've heard complaints about the procedure that was followed to produce these resolutions because councillors weren't involved in writing them. That's from councillors themselves. And my response to that is, why weren't you involved? At last month's city council meeting, I was one of 14 people who spoke to you during the public comment period in support of the protesters, asking the city council to step up and learn about their demands, to write resolutions to improve the police accountability, etc. There were 17 public comments total last time. So with 14 people advocating that you take action to improve police accountability, that means that more than 80% of the speakers asked you to do this. And yet the vast majority of you did not speak to the protesters until they brought forward these fully formed resolutions about a week ago. To then complain that you didn't have a hand in producing them is disingenuous, and it betrays the fact that you ignored what people said during last month's public comment, and you didn't do anything about it for 3 weeks. I hope you will listen better tonight. The final point I would like to make is that I've heard a lot of comments from councilors using Cuomo's executive order as a reason to not pass anything now. I would argue that we only have until 2021 to be in compliance with these new policies, which is only 9 months away. If we want to use this as a chance to make substantial changes, we need to start now. And that's what's so great about the resolutions that are on the table tonight. They're doing things like resolving to have a public hearing on creating a police accountability board. Well, a public hearing sounds like a great first step in this process. They're resolving to get annual data from the police department, annual data that until 2017, the GPD was already producing. Data sounds like another great first step to me, wouldn't you agree? I could go on, but I think I've made my point. Instead of an excuse for not passing these resolutions tonight, Cuomo's executive order is a strong reason to pass them. I've taken up enough of your time, so I'll leave you with this. Many of you have said that you want to hear from the community, but the people of Geneva have been speaking, marching, clapping from their porches, participating in educational programs, and addressing you right here. I know you've heard us. The question is whether you think that these voices are worth listening to, whether you're going to say, that's just the youth, or that's just wards 5 and 6, or that's just the people of color. No, the people of Geneva have been speaking. You have the opportunity tonight to show that you've been listening. Thank you for the time.
Yes.
Is Janet Gale?
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me here. I am a professor at Hobart William Smith. I'm a historian, and I specialize, I'm a historian of the civil rights movement. I would like to use my time today to give a little bit of a historical perspective in relation to some of the things that I have been hearing as your sort of feedback from the resolutions that have been presented to you. I speak in support of the resolutions presented by the people, by the PPP. Just going to give a little historical perspective. This thing has been going too fast. You're moving too fast. That's what they said about emancipation. If gradual emancipation had been put in place, slavery would have gone on until sometime in the 1900s. It was the insistence on people who insisted on immediate emancipation. That's why we had the emancipation of slaves and the abolition of slavery in 1865, not a gradualist approach. The next thing that I want to bring up about going too fast is the civil rights movement of the 1960s. We all celebrate Martin Luther King. We all celebrate this as a moment of liberation and progression in American society. Well, they told Martin Luther King as well that he was going too fast, that he was asking for too much. In fact, there is a very famous protest song about that, sung by Nina Simone, and I'll just give you a few lines of the lyrics. Keep on saying, go slow, to do things gradually would bring more tragedy. Why don't you see it? Why don't you feel it? I don't know. I don't know. I'm going to really ask you to think about this, that putting things off, kicking things down the line, kicking the pan, the tin down the line is exactly to be on the wrong side of history. You have an opportunity as city councillors to make history. And I ask you to listen, take seriously the voices of these people. And it's not just Black folks. It's Black folks, it's white folks, it's Asian Americans. It crosses generation and it crosses class. It is about the community of Geneva. And I ask you in all good faith to act in a timely fashion, to not talk about gradual implementation, but to take things seriously and to look about what needs to be done imminently. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, City Clerk, you reading the next statement?
This is from Stephen Cottrell. He says he is a lifelong citizen of the area and a 37-year homeowner in the city of Geneva. He says, I am opposed to any curtailing of police services. I believe they do an exemplary job even in these unusually divisive times. I beg you not to cut any funding to our Geneva City Police Department. I cannot imagine being able to live here without the security they provide. Please do not defund the police.
Thank
And
you. The next
Steve-
reading, please.
Thank you. Next, we have Stephanie Anir, Lucille Mallard, and Michael Pasalacqua. And that's not our chief Pasalacqua. That is a resident of the city. His name is Michael Pasalacqua.
Okay, Stephanie and Ear, please. Is Stephanie there?
She is here. Just give us a moment.
Okay.
Okay.
Is it worth saying, respond to my email? I don't know if you've got it, so I'm going to say it here, or should I just say it?
I'm sorry, Stephanie.
The co-host says, wait, am I ready?
Yeah.
Yes, you're ready, Stephanie.
Hello?
Hi, Stephanie. You're good to go.
Hey, I'm sorry about that. Thank you. Hello, counselors. Thanks for this time. My name is Stephanie Anir, and I live on Washington Street. At Monday's work session, I heard several of you say that you needed to hear from more people. I heard you say that you needed more time, and I wanted to talk about that. As Adam and many others have said, wait often means never going to happen. So deciding where waiting and research are truly needed is important. And if waiting isn't reasonable or needed, the action needs to be swift and deliberate. So discussing Resolution 34, the public hearing regarding the Police Accountability Board, I just want to reiterate that this is a vote to establish a public hearing to receive comment about the Police Accountability Board. This is probably the most important step you can take to show that you are listening to community concerns. If nothing else tonight, make sure that you pay attention to this resolution. A police accountability board has been asked for by residents for almost 10 years, and it would be making good on an aspect of the community compact never fully realized. A public hearing creates a dedicated space to discuss this single important issue. Don't wait to start this needed conversation. To just touch on a few others, the whistleblower protection, I question who else needs to weigh in on this Resolution 38. Who is against protecting someone speaking up if someone is hurt or in danger? That stance would concern me. We have whistleblower protection in every level of business and government, except right here in City Hall. Yeah. This is not just protection for police whistleblowers, but for all city employees. I see no reason to wait to pass this resolution. Regarding the Resolution 37, the Geneva Police Department use of force policy, it is dangerous and negligent not to update this policy as soon as possible. This is a needed update that should have been done by the police themselves. No one needs to ask their constituents about this. Of course, the chief should look at this document first, but this updated policy is only 4 pages based on well-researched national best practices. and the chief has had well over a week to look this over. This should also be ready for a vote tonight. Resolution 30, timeline for review of a body camera policy. This specifically is a vote to convene a task force to study the policy. Voting for this is asking both police and community members to be a part of a timely process together. Isn't that the goal? I wish I had time to go through all of the proposed resolutions on tonight's agenda. I was able to send you a complete email last night, but I want to reiterate that these resolutions are simple, straightforward, and can be passed tonight. Please do not tell our community to wait. Finally, while appreciating the years of collective work from the NAACP, I want to amplify Adam Fryer's words that the people's peaceful protest is not the same as the NAACP. Just like our local Knights of Columbus doesn't speak for all local white people, the local NAACP does not speak for all local Black people. Those who have been out in the streets this past month working hard for reasonable, measurable police improvements deserve to speak for themselves and to be heard. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Steph.
Tony DiCostanzo's next.
No, I'm sorry, Mayor. We have Lucille Mallard.
Okay, Lucille
Tony.
Mallard.
Let's see. I have a letter from her, and it's actually from the NAACP, the Geneva area branch of the NAACP. And it says, this letter is being submitted to the City Council of Geneva, New York, to communicate the Geneva area branch NAACP's position on the people's peaceful protest resolutions. We understand from the Finger Lakes Times that there will be a working meeting held by the Geneva City Council on Monday, the 29th. This meeting is in preparation for a vote that will take place on Wednesday, July 1st, on multiple resolutions submitted by the People's Peaceful Protest of Geneva. The Geneva area branch NAACP strongly recommends that the vote be tabled until such time as the resolutions can be reviewed against several state executive orders and bills that have been recently passed. While the NAACP feels that we are aligned with a number of the resolutions from both the local and national perspective, we feel that an additional time period of 30 days would allow for the following. Number one, the NAACP to gather additional information and feedback from its local constituency. Number two, the opportunity for the NAACP to meet with members of City Council, the People's Peaceful Protest, a representative of the community, and the Geneva Police Department to discuss an inclusive strategy to address. Number three, a review of the repeal of 50A and Executive Order 203 to identify and support common objectives and understand the Geneva Police Department's accountability by a time of implementation for the aforementioned objectives. And number four, to ensure a proper and unified approach that supports the NAACP's national objectives, quote, we are done dying, unquote. Without the tabling of the resolutions, the Geneva area NAACP is unable to support the presented resolutions at this time. We feel that the resolutions are as presented are not representative of all of the marginalized and underrepresented voices in our community. Again, we fundamentally agree with several of the objectives identified in a number of the resolutions submitted by the People's Peaceful Protest. The NAACP is currently focusing on the community concerns noted below and is seeking your response and engagement on the following items. Number one, ensuring that our local municipality has standing citizens review boards with subpoena power. Number two, review of the Geneva Police Department use of,
Use of force.
No, something with continuum, inclusive of 6 steps and clear rules of escalation. Demand that Geneva Police Department bans the use of knee and chokeholds. Number 4, review Open Records Act's repeals of 50A addresses in part. Number 5, review of Geneva Police Department's record of disciplining our officers charged with misconduct. Number 6, statewide review board for police officers who use deadly force. We look forward to continuing this discussion. Thank you and regards, Lucille Mallard, President, Geneva Area Branch, NAACP.
Lori, just for clarification, I did have Tony on my list, but did he take him off or?
I'm trying to remember. No, I think I talked to Tony and he said he had sent his comments to council, so he was all set. He did not need to speak tonight.
All right, thank
Sorry
you
about
very
that.
much. Next is Michael Pasolaco, not the chief.
Correct. Again, this is not our chief Pasalacqua. This is Michael Pasalacqua, just happens to be a resident of the city, and his name happens to be Michael Pasalacqua. He said, I'd like to submit a public comment to be read by the city council staff during the meeting scheduled for July 1st. He says, I'd like to express my support for the establishment of a police accountability board in Geneva, which in my opinion would be hugely beneficial as we all work together to move toward a more positive and mutually beneficial relationship between our excellent police force and the citizens of Geneva, especially those in our communities of color. Under our current systems, in which police usually investigate and decide what consequences, if any, their fellow officers should face in cases of potential police misconduct, fewer than 1 in 12 complaints of police misconduct nationwide results in any kind of disciplinary action. In the eyes of the civilian community members, a system of greater accountability by implementing the Police Accountability Board that includes civilians would go a long way towards forging greater confidence in the proceedings of our police forces in cases of potential misconduct, and ultimately result in higher overall trust in our men and women of the badge. Thank you for your time and efforts for the upcoming meeting. Michael Pasalacqua.
Okay, next 3.
I have Penny Hankins, Amaris Elliott Engel, and Heather May, and they will all be speaking on their own behalf.
Penny Hankins, please.
Penny, you're muted. I don't know if you're trying to speak. I see that you're muted. There you go. Oh, nope, you're still muted.
That's my fault. We're both trying to do it at the same time. So I'll let her know.
My name is Penny Hankins, and I'm reside in Geneva within Ward 3. I believe we should hold a public hearing regarding the establishment of an independent police accountability board. We need independent oversight to provide a check and balance system for the police. The case of Jack Montesanto, in which the officer was charged with a misdemeanor instead of a felony for choking of a female citizen in the public safety building, demonstrates a stunning lack of checks and balances against police power in our community and in our courts. This cannot go on. Our citizenry demands police accountability now. Thank you.
Thank you, Penny.
Okay, Amaris Elliott Engel.
She should be just coming on right
Okay,
now.
there she is.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Amaris Elliott Engel. I live at 9 Delancey Drive, and I'm a lawyer by profession. In 2016, I participated in the Citizens Police Academy, and I had the opportunity to meet many of Geneva's law enforcement officers. I think it's extremely important that the city of Geneva engage with the national conversation about how our law enforcement officers interact with our citizens who are people of color. We've made many great strides to address racism, but we have much more work to do. Whether it is the historic discrimination of redlining that prevented Black families from getting mortgages and building the wealth of their families, the health disparities that have emerged showing that people of color are having higher death rates and infection rates from COVID-19, or the racial profiling or excessive force in policing. The United States has systemic institutional racism that emerges in all facets of our society, whether it is in public safety, housing, or healthcare. As a first step in restorative justice, I fully support and specifically ask our city councilors to vote in favor of all of the police reform measures. All of these steps are necessary to undertake restorative justice in our community, and I feel most strongly about the importance of a police accountability board to equalize the power imbalance in our community. The police have nothing to fear from a police accountability board if they are doing their jobs legally, appropriately, and professionally. And there's certainly no harm in voting to have a public hearing on whether this is appropriate for Geneva. I know many of our officers are good people and have a much more difficult job to do than I do. But power inequities are real for our young people of color. I speak from a place of privilege. I'm a person who's white, I'm educated, and I'm a homeowner. And all of us need to walk in the shoes of people of less power and undertake restorative justice. We should be coming together to hear the stories of people of color's experience with policing in Geneva and create a consensus of what we can do to repair the harm. I ask for each and every one of our city councilors to support police reform and begin this process by examining the best practices to improve policing in Geneva. Thank you.
Thank you, Amaris.
Okay, Heather May, please.
Hello?
Hi, Heather. We can hear you.
Great, terrific. Thank you. I live on Delancey Drive also by weird happenstance. I would like to say that the foundational documents of our government declared Blacks to be 3/5 of a person, and we are still waiting for Black lives to matter. Sometimes the magnitude of a moment is too large for me to communicate in prose. So I have a poem that I've written for all victims of racial profiling and police brutality in our country and right here in Geneva. It's called Seeing is Believing. The events in Birmingham have so increased the cries for equality that no city or state or legislative body can prudently choose to ignore them. That was John F. Kennedy, June 19th, 1963. I wasn't there, not yet, but I've read about it in US history texts at the Southern Poverty Law Center's Civil Rights Memorial, on Wikipedia, and in so many novels and autobiographies that I no longer can name them. Images of nonviolent Black protesters being fire hosed, attacked by dogs, shot at by the police. They say these images provoked the conscience of a nation to revolt against segregation and the long history of white supremacy. Or as the New York Daily News put it nearly 50 years later, 8 days toward America's conscience, with television cameras covering the drama, broadcasting brutality to the rest of the country, becoming a catalyst for social change. 30 years later, I watched as video of police brutally attacking Rodney King repeatedly played across the screen of my dorm TV. It was the first time my privileged white eyes saw the truth laid bare, the legacy of slavery alive, well, thriving, not vanquished by broadcasts of brutality when my parents were my age. I'd say it has to happen each generation to counter the narrative of progress taught in schools and regurgitated thoughtlessly on programs created by people who look like me, to make others who look like me feel like we are not the problem because the problem is past, festering only in a few bad apples. But it's clear, given the proliferation of videos of assassinations, lynchings, assaults that cross my screen as I scroll through social media, seeing hasn't engendered believing. Each time the cry of shock reverberates for a few days as we express outrage, an outpouring of support, self-reflection, a promise to do better, to not ever, never, ever let this happen again. Until the next video surfaces and we do it all again. We've seen plenty. The evidence is there to convict us of a psychopathic desire to destroy Black lives, even as we rely on them for our very survival. White people make justice blind, because if seeing is believing, she'd have condemned us all to rot in jail centuries ago. Please, City Council, do better. Stop waiting. Pass the people's peaceful protest resolutions now. Thank you.
Lori,
Thank
next.
you, Heather. I have Ann Kosef Jones, Michael Salato, and Sadie Kenyon Dean, and they will all be speaking on their own behalf.
Okay, and Kosef Jones, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. So my name is Ann Kosef Jones. I live on Highland Avenue. I'll be as quick as I can. Thanks for this opportunity and thanks for listening. I support the resolution submitted by the People's Peaceful Protest, and I strongly urge the council to pass all of them. When members of our community, a community that you have sworn to represent, tell us that they don't feel protected by the police and have ideas that will make our entire city safer and help our city services meet the needs of all Genevans, it's your responsibility to listen and to act. And frankly, Black and other underserved members of our community have been telling us this and meeting with no action from city officials for way too long. So please acknowledge their generosity in helping us find solutions to a system that isn't working for everyone, and take advantage of this moment in US history to act on their excellent and thoughtful resolutions And if your instinct is to say, I agree with these goals, but why can't the message be delivered in a way that's more palatable to white city residents and to the police officers? I just urge you to reflect on the fact that white people have been responding to civil rights movements with that same question throughout US history. And to remember that our community members have been trying to get through to you for years and it just hasn't worked. So now is your chance. Thanks. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Anne.
Michael Salato.
Good evening. I'm Michael Salato, a resident of Ward 6. I would like to start off by thanking Police Chief Pasalacqua and the department for allowing the Black Lives Matter protests to gather in their parking lot and to peacefully march across Geneva unharassed for the past several weeks. I would especially like to thank Chief Pasalacqua, Officer Arroyo, and the other officers whose names I did not catch for listening and walking with us the first few days. It takes self-restraint and humility to stand in front of a crowd as they address their grievances towards you. As seen in recent events, other places across the nation have not been as fortunate. That being said, our nation is in a sad state of affairs when we are grateful that our police office recognizes our First Amendment rights instead of it being the basic expectation of those who protect and serve us. Allowing us to peacefully protest is the very least that can be done here and does not directly address the city's prevalent issues. The issues at the forefront of our local Black Lives Matter movement is that the city is failing to hold its police accountable for any mishandling and abuses. It has been repeatedly seen that it is too easy for officer misconduct to be swept under the rug. And I get that. I understand mistakes happen in high-stress jobs and having the responsibility to administer consequences to your brother in arms when they slip up is tough. It is human nature to cover for those who have your back. That is why the police should not be given the responsibility to police themselves. The founding fathers understood this and implemented a system of checks and balances in the federal government to prevent one office from holding unchecked power. Our police department should be no different. Any power left unchecked can be too easily any power left unchecked can too easily let its own abuses slide, which has been seen numerous times in the city over the past decade alone. Instead of more inevitable lawsuits due to police abuse, what the city needs is actual lasting reform, and I believe that a police accountability board is a great way to go about that reform. Giving the power back to the people to hold officers accountable to the law and their own use of force policy is the only way that I realistically expect to see change. Anything else would have just as little impact as the community compact, and the people of Geneva deserve better. It is my understanding that the city attorney has advised against the Police Accountability Board as they deemed it in violation of Governor Cuomo's executive orders for police reform. I am no lawyer and I do not know the intricacies of the order, but even if this is the case, Geneva citizens must still be present and heard during the mandatory police reforms. Therefore, I argue that City Council votes yes tonight regarding the Police Accountability Board hearing and develop it in line with the legal proceedings that take place regarding Rochester's Police Accountability Board. Anything less would be an injustice to the people of our lovely city. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Dean, please.
Hi, I'm Sadie Kenyon Dean. I'm a resident of Ward 1, and I urge City Council to vote yes on the resolutions tonight. Just today, there was a Blue Lives Matter protest, and while the Black Lives Matter protesters were peacefully protesting in the same spot that we've been protesting for the past month, we got a lot of hate messages from people that were allegedly there to back the blue. We got people saying things like white lives matter, people saying just awful, hateful things to us. And these are the constituents that are in favor of continuing to overfund the police. The police have a over $3 million budget as compared to the budget for food and housing and education, about 100 times the budget that the city allots for actual city needs. And the Geneva Police Department has not been held accountable for numerous, unspeakably brutal misconduct in the past decade. And officers that engage in this misconduct, rather than being held accountable, are put on paid leave and requiring more funding for the police force when that funding could go to the community and address the problems that are causing crime in these communities. I urge City Council to listen to the people, not people that are spewing a hateful rhetoric, spreading misinformation on Facebook, saying hateful things about Black Lives Matter protesters every day on Facebook and in real life as well. So please stand up for Black lives, stand up for your community, and vote yes on the people's peaceful protest resolutions. I yield my time.
Thank you, Sadie.
Lori, next three, please.
I have Connor Hibbard, Karen Frost Arnold, and Brianne Kisselstein. And I will read Connor's comments.
Thank you, Lori.
He says, my name is Connor Hibbard, and I am not an activist. While I support the Black Lives Matter movement, I have not attended any protest, mostly out of the COVID concerns. I have not been as vigilant as I should have been. I guess it was hard for me to put myself in the shoes of people like George Floyd and the many other Black people who were unjustly killed by police officers. For me, the wake-up call was the story of Elijah McClain. For the uninitiated, he was killed in 2019, dying of cardiac arrest in the hospital a few days after being restrained by police and injected with ketamine by paramedics. Elijah vomited several times while being restrained by police and apologized to them for his involuntary sickness. He was a kind soul, an introvert who was doing absolutely nothing illegal when he was approached by police, who were called by someone who said Elijah was looking sketchy. Hearing his story and reading his words, I was scared in a fundamental way because I saw myself in Elijah. I am an introvert. I am not confrontational, and I don't want to be bothered when I'm walking alone. I apologize even when others wrong me, and I am easily frightened by authority. I thought to myself, that could have been me. The very next thought I had, however, was that though I will never truly know, that probably wouldn't have been me because I'm white and Elijah McClain was Black. While Elijah died in Colorado, his story and the story of countless others like him reverberated across the nation, even in our city. As this council contemplates the reforms proposed by activists much more informed and forthright than myself, I implore you to act swiftly. At the work session that I listened to on Monday, I was disappointed in the amount of grandstanding and bickering that I saw. There was a lot of talk of secondary issues which, while worthwhile to talk about, aren't really the points we should be talking about right now. Why are we discussing Facebook discourse and who represents who when police are murdering Black people like Elijah McClain, like George Floyd, like Breonna Taylor, like Corey Jackson? The time to sit back and mull over these decisions for months and years is over. I absolutely agree with being informed and incorporating many voices into the conversation, but we need to act now in reappropriating funds and holding police accountable, both in this community and all communities. How many more Elijah McClains have to die before this becomes urgent enough to deal with now? I hope Elijah's story was enough to spur some of you to action. For the people like me who are angry, scared, and called to action, I implore you, please put aside politics and personal quarrels to do what needs to be done to save lives.
Karen Frost Arnold, next, please.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Karen Frost Arnold, and I live in Ward 3. I'm speaking today in support of the people's peaceful protest. I listened to the 2-hour city council meeting on Monday, and I was incredibly disappointed to hear so many calls for delay in addressing the issue of police reform. I sat there in disbelief as I heard so many of you argue that we shouldn't rush to action, that we shouldn't do something now to make this community safer for everyone. The idea that these proposals are coming out of nowhere is absurd. People of color and other anti-racist activists have been talking about racism in the police department and the problems of police violence in Geneva for years and years. For example, Tools for Social Change has been working on racism in our community for a long time. People in this community have been researching these problems for years. They have been talking for years, and now is the time to act. These resolutions that you have in front of you are carefully researched and based on concrete data of what works in police reform. I spoke to you at the last city council meeting about the need to reform the use of force policy. The protesters have provided us with incredibly detailed and useful suggestions for improvements. This is a true service to our community. These resolutions are based in the real-life experience of people who actually suffer the problems of racism in Geneva. We need to acknowledge something I did not hear acknowledged in the meeting on Monday, that we are not all equally experts on this issue. White people tend to have fewer interactions with the police, and they are not as likely to experience profiling and violence at the hands of the police. That means that many of us white people, me, Many of you and many of your constituents just don't have the relevant experience of the problems the protesters are drawing your attention to. That means that we need to listen to their stories and their carefully researched proposals and act on them. I strongly reject the suggestions made at the meeting on Monday that the process that Governor Cuomo has outlined gives us any reason to delay. It's a process. That's what he's called for. We need to start this process and act now. Thank you.
Next is Breen or Brianne Kisselstein.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yeah, and I apologize if I didn't get your name correct.
My name's Brianna Kisselstein. I moved here a few years ago to work on my PhD at Cornell Agritech, the station. And when I moved here, I was appalled by the number of police officers for such a small, safe town. I completely scrapped my statement tonight in order to save you guys time. I've served on many assemblies myself, so I understand. But to keep it short, I will just say this. We are spending way too much on police. The police department is a violent brute force that's supposed to maintain public safety, but is only providing white safety at the unsafety of people of color. I'll provide you a very quick example called MASK, Mothers Against Senseless Killing. This is an organization in Chicago that has worked to prevent violence and prevent crime in their communities simply by going out and selling hot dogs. If we simply fund other community programs to make sure that our community has housing, food, healthcare, all of these things, you will simply prevent the crime and reduce crime rather than hiring a police force that will escalate violence and cause more inequality. That being said, while I am pushing to work towards the goal of defunding the police and funding more community programs, the People's Peaceful Protest has no resolutions for this. Their resolutions, if you read them, are things that help all community members and are not polarizing, are not radical. So please vote to pass these resolutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Brianna.
Like next three.
I have Joyce Simmons, Jackie Augustine, and Melvina Ivankova.
Okay, Joyce Simmons, please.
Hi, thank you for this opportunity to share my comments with you. I realize actually that yeah, a lot of people actually are afraid to comment because of fear of retaliation, actually. So what I've noticed is that there's a lot of people on one side of this issue that are speaking in front of the camera. And I think I'm the first one to actually voice a different point of view. Okay, so I'm going to talk about transparency in city government, which I think we all agree on, but I think this should be looked at all levels of government, not just the police department. We need to have a transparent process of adopting things. Can't be just rushed through and people don't even know what happened. Okay, so I'm just going to read this letter that I wrote to Mayor Valentino and the city council members. We are grateful to you for expressing your concern about fair and equitable treatment of all people by law enforcement. We share this concern and deplore any abuse of power or brutality. We are writing to express our deep concern about measures to reform the City of Geneva Police Department without a complete understanding of what this reform would entail. We are asking that multiple viewpoints be presented on this issue to the people of the City of Geneva who depend on law enforcement for their public health and safety. We also ask that no measures be adopted until after these views have been presented and public. Lastly, we are asking that these issues be discussed in a town hall forum with reasonable time allotted for discussion of all of the points of concern. The points from multiple perspectives should be clearly written and posted on the City of Geneva website and accompanied by detailed video presentations for people who are more visual or audio learners. In 2020, we became aware of several incidents of vandalism to personal property, including residents' cars, and to public property, including the Jefferson Street park bench and table. This is an ongoing problem. Recently, there have been multiple burglaries and continued vandalism in the City of Geneva. If anything, these incidents indicate that we need to step up enforcement, not reduce it. Police reform is a very important issue, and we must have an informed citizenry to provide input to our elected officials. We support our law enforcement. They put their lives on the line to ensure our community's public health and safety. Again, we ask that you, the mayor, and the members of the city council allow time for much needed discussion before any measures to reduce law enforcement resources are enacted. Concerned citizens of Geneva. In summary, we are recommending careful and thoughtful deliberation of any and all resolutions to reform law enforcement in our city. We are very concerned about unintended negative consequences, including costs to public health and public safety, legal costs that could potentially far exceed any possible budgetary savings. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Jackie Augustine.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So I am appearing here, I guess, as that ghost of councils past again. Back in the summer of 2011, there were 2 council meetings held in June and July, just like we're doing now, where police accountability dominated the discussion. The first one, June 1st of 2011, was just a week after Corey Jackson was killed by then Officer Reale. Council listened to 24 individuals who came to the podium to share personal accounts of alleged police misconduct, and a list of 25 additional complaints, unique complaints, were presented at that time. Of all of them, only one, which described Officer Reale punching a young woman in the face, was fully responded to by the department. There was no independent review board at the time. The request of each speaker was similar. We need an independent police accountability board. You don't need to take my word for any of this about complaints. You can read the minutes, which give a summary of each, and my notes and recollection provide some additional details. Many of the people were people of color. I think there were only 2 white women who spoke of that group, and they recounted encouraging their sons to move out of Geneva after graduating high school because of repeated harassment. A woman reported 7 police cars coming to a vehicle stop, which resulted in no arrest. And you can read the minutes. I don't want to spend the time on that. I immediately introduced a resolution for an independent out-of-county investigator for the Corey Jackson case. And one counselor immediately backed me up, and that was Counselor John Grieco. He said that he could not wait for justice. If you check the record, you'll see that that resolution passed that night, immediately and unanimously. Counselor Grieco, Elcock, Hagerman, O'Malley, Cosentino, D'Amico, Valentino, myself, and Mayor Stu Einstein took that first step right away. But it wasn't enough. At the next meeting, we learned that the investigation took less than a month, was presented to the grand jury that didn't indict. The family came back to say they were not told where the process even stood, something that one of the family members said would not have been the case. And that's true. The family of my attacker was told every step of the way through the grand jury process what was going to happen. What's the difference? White victim, attacker's not a police officer. People have asked repeatedly for equal treatment under the law, and there was a lot of talk about a police accountability at that time to ensure it. But here's how things were left at the council meeting that summer. City manager at the time, Matt Horn, said, quote, "We can't come up with answers on our own. We'll have to ask Mrs. Mallard to help get a big room together and listen to everybody. Let's pull leaders together for the answers until we make sure the community is satisfied. Now we're hearing the same thing from this administration. Get a big table, bring in the police, we'll all talk it out and everything will be fine. The last time I checked, I don't think justice is a topic of debate. If you're white and wealthy, you get it. You might get more than your fair share, but how about the rest of the community? So before anyone falls back on some anti-cop argument against a police accountability board, let me just say this. During my time on council, I also praised police work. In a text to City Manager Matt Horn, sorry to put him on the spot, I see he's on the meeting. I watched a contentious traffic stop in front of my house that involved a large Black man who was not immediately willing to listen to the officer's demands to exit the vehicle. I texted him to say, quote, I'm watching some really top-notch police work here. They're compassionate and steady. Too bad that people can't hear more about this kind of response. Maybe if we had an independent board that could hold these examples up, that would improve trust. I know the two officers that were involved in that incident, not going to mention them because in this climate, I know no officer wants to be associated with me, which is too bad, but I understand it. But let me just say this about those officers. They're strong, they're confident, they're bright, and they're well-trained. Officers like that are a blessing to our community. But officers that lack skill, moral fortitude, good judgment are a threat. Without a police accountability board, we can't be assured of the difference between the two. We do the community and the force a disservice by not having a reliable process that's independent that sorts these things out. Your vote tonight for a public hearing cannot wait. It doesn't commit you to any particular plan, but it gives the community more than just the same words they heard 9 years ago. What seems new or rushed to you, I can assure you, has been the longtime struggle of too many. And you can't say you haven't heard it before, it's in the minutes. So I think you have an obligation to acknowledge that and to act. I think that the proposed resolution for the Police Accountability Board is good. It conforms with state law, and I think you could adopt it as is. But setting a public hearing is the first step, and I don't understand how you can tell people they need to wait any longer. Thank you.
Melina Ivanchikova.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking my comment. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Melina Ivanchikova. I have been a Geneva resident for 8 years, and I love Geneva, and I'm grateful for all of you for listening. I'm also here to speak in favor for the resolutions brought forward by the People's Peaceful Protest. And one thing that others haven't yet said that I think I can contribute to the discussion is just, wow, what an exciting historical moment we're in. First of all, we're in the middle of 2 pandemics, which has taken people out into the streets. And I don't know if all of you know this, but it takes a tremendous amount of bravery to go out on the street with a sign and make your voice heard and say to the world, this is what I believe in, and please don't leave me here all alone. So I think that we have a unique opportunity right now to examine ourselves as a society, and we need to take a look at our institutions. Yes, a lot of the national dialogue is about police brutality, so we do want to take a look at our police, but that's just the beginning. We need to look at all of our institutions. You, as the City Council, are a tremendous institution. You have a lot of power to make significant changes to benefit all of the working people of Geneva. And we need to take a look at our schools, and we need to just explore and understand and listen. A few people have mentioned about how being white gives you a different experience with the police. That's absolutely true for me. I can tell you I've been stopped for doing something illegal at least 3 times and given a warning. That's not the story that our community members of color are sharing. So that's not fair. It's not fair for our youth to be targeted and harassed and followed home and surveilled and for our neighborhoods to have such a strong police presence. And so I laud the protesters for having the guts to camp out at the police station. I mean, who could ever think of such a thing? And also, I'm just so proud that they wrote up and researched their resolutions and canvassed quite a lot of people to get an opinion. And I'm grateful that the council is opening up the floor to get more public comments in. I think that that this is our moment, and I hope that you'll take it. I also think that the resolutions that they've put forward are really mild. I hope we do more. Let's do more. Thank you.
Lori, next three.
I have Karen Patricio, Brianna Barton, and Charles King.
Okay, Karen, I see you requested 5 minutes. Based on the number of people, I'm going to ask you to stick to 3, please.
I am looking for her as well. And just the Zoom was fixed. Thank you, Adam. Working with Zoom, we have capacity. So if people are watching this on Felix TV, and I think we have everyone, but we're missing her. So we could ask again, Lori. Could you give me
put her on hold?
Could you just share her last name so we can work on it?
Karen Patricio, is that, or should we move on?
Hello, can you hear me?
There she is.
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Hello, so I'm here to speak in support of the People's Peaceful Protest and the resolutions that they have put forth. As many others have spoken before me and many others will continue to speak after me, there's a lot of community members here that are in support of that from all levels, from younger all the way to older generations, from people that work in our industry, and then others that are also scholars and members of our institutions as well. So I know that there is another Back the Blue protest that was happening earlier today, and a lot of people may argue that racism doesn't exist in our small community. We can't compare the unfortunate incidents that resulted in the death of George Floyd or Breonna Taylor or even Elijah, because those were in larger cities and not smaller towns like Geneva. However, just 9 years ago, Corey Jackson was murdered by police officers here in this small town of Geneva. Not only that, but I'm here as an educator. So I would like to educate a few of other people that have been voicing misconceptions or just inaccurate information. So systemic, institutional, and individual racism are all levels of racism that exist even here in our small town. Individual racism has occurred right in my own classroom here in Geneva City Schools. Individual racism has also plagued some of my students in local parking lots just this summer, since this whole COVID and pandemic started. Institutional racism also occurs. For those of you that might not know, that's lack of representation of diversity in positions of power. As I look around at our city council members and I look around at our teachers, people that are in positions of power, I don't see a lot of representation of the Black community. I don't see a lot of representation of the 30+% of people here in Geneva City Schools that are diverse members of Black communities, Asian communities, Hispanic. I don't see many people like that in power. So I'm here to provide a voice for those who are unable to voice their opinions in these types of situations, whether that is for fear against retaliation, lack of knowledge, or lack of equitable resources that would allow them to connect or physically attend our meetings. As a for the topic of police funding and defunding of that, I honestly have no idea why we cannot reduce the funding that is allocated for our police department. Looking at the budget that was recently passed just this year, it shows that police salaries and wages have increased by over $150,000 over the last 3 years. That's an increase of almost 5%. In more relatable terms, that could pay for our entire city council and the mayor's salary for the last 3 years. That the entire salary for 3 years is just as much as they are requesting to increase for their budget for this year. So please, I urge you to keep in mind Geneva's population, not just the white population that is out there loud and in the protests going on right now. I'm not sure if they ended or not, but not just that white population. I urge you to keep in mind Geneva's populations of minorities, especially the youth of our city and the town. Yes, our officers have gone through implicit bias trainings this past year, so I commend them for that. But actions don't change overnight. I urge you to at least move forward with construction of an external and diverse police accountability board made up of our community members and community leaders. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate the consideration.
Thank you, Karen.
Brianna Barton.
Lori, if you could move her for the moment down.
Okay.
The recap at the end.
I can do that.
Will you read Charles King then, please?
Is Charles on? I wasn't sure. He said he was going to try to make it. If not, I can read his comment.
I didn't.
I'm here.
That's fine.
Oh,
Okay.
there you go, Charles. Thank you.
I'm here.
Go ahead, Charles.
It says I can't start my video, so I'll just talk. Hello, Council. I'm Charles King, 363 Washington Street. Here we go. We just got to the end of birthday season in my house. All 5 of us have birthdays in a short stretch of months. We have a tradition of sharing pictures with us holding up number candles indicating our age. So my daughter just turned 9. I just turned 49. And I was so struck by the news of the death of Ahmaud Arbery in the middle of our birthday season that the candle thing took on a new significance for me this year. Ahmaud will never turn 26. Erica just turned 47 and was overwhelmed by the news of George Floyd, who will never turn 47. Corey Jackson will never turn 36. I've been saddened and outraged that so many people who have a different skin color than mine, or whose ancestors lived on a different continent than mine, have so many birthdays they will not get to celebrate. I've known Adam Fryer since he was just a kid. He's played drums for shows I've been in. I remember seeing him act the part of King Aslan the Lion in Geneva High School's Narnia musical many years ago. He was fantastic. I've participated with my kids in drum circles that he's run as part of Two Herons Drum Circle. I'm proud that my kids have had a chance to be with him there. It saddens me greatly that the sons and daughters of Geneva are feeling excess pressure based on their race from local law enforcement authorities. But it does not surprise me, given the poor preparation for police in America generally, and given my experiences as a dad in a multiracial family, because I know that racism in Geneva is real, systemic, and starts at an early age. I've spoken to council about this before. And you've heard me say this before. I believe that it is possible to be both pro-police and pro-oversight. Robust and careful community oversight of police activities will be helpful for police and the city to be on the same page. It will help the excellent work to be brought to light and praised, and for questionable work to be illuminated and corrected before it becomes problematic and systematized. Democracy is self-government. Self-government assumes community approval of the convening of a police force. In our city, independent, high-paid consultants have suggested the implementation of a police accountability board in very recent years. I urge all of you who campaigned on transparency to support resolutions establishing a police accountability board, including the People's Peaceful Protest resolution. This is your moment to do what the previous council did not, and enact this common sense transparency measure that will help both the police and the public. Change is not easy, but right now it is necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles.
Next 3.
Sarah Wagner, Peter Gilat, and Irene Rodriguez. I'll read Sarah and Irene's, and Councilor Galanese is going to read Peter Gilat's.
Okay.
So from Sarah Wagner, it should be great to have a comment. It would be great to have a comment read into the record. I have lived in Geneva for 6 years. I have come to love this small city and the creative, hardworking, and caring people who live here. Because this town is so small, everyone feels like my neighbor, and that's a great feeling. I believe we are responsible for the well-being of our neighbors. My neighbors are saying that they have been harmed by the police, harassed, beaten, choked, and even killed. There is no acceptable amount of harassing, beating, choking, and killing in any organization, let alone the organization we task with upholding the peace of our city. We need reform. Our neighbors are telling us that they need to live in peace in this city, so let us listen. Bar chokeholds and no-knock warrants. Make police truly accountable with their jobs and freedom on the line. Give the people access to and say about what makes an officer no longer worthy of their lofty position of power. Consider if money for weapons wouldn't be better spent on teachers or downtown or subsidizing access to healthcare. I believe that a good system that de-escalates violence is safer for a community and officers. A respectable GPD is good for me, my neighbors, officers, and the city's financial future. That's from Sarah Wagner, Ward 3.
Counselor Galanese, please read Mr. Gelati's.
Frank, you're on mute. There you go.
Sorry about that. Okay. Dated June 30th, 2020. To the City of Geneva Council members, Mayor, and City Manager. I would like to go on record expressing my concerns and having you address the following. City of Geneva's fiscal budget. I understand that the City of Geneva is facing a tough road ahead financially. We join every other municipality with budget deficits, and the COVID-19 virus crisis has made it even worse. All that in addition to our tax base. Taxpayers in Geneva are aware of our shrinking tax base. I'm 65 years old, and this has been a concern for years, if not decades. It seems that base continues to shrink, and I would think that council would discuss their plans to improve the issues instead of spending valuable time trying to save chickens. GPD, Police Department reform. I understand the need for a structured plan to reform policies and procedures with the GPD that will improve transparency, accountability, and develop positive working relations with all of our residents. The Governor of New York has already implemented laws addressing today's issues facing law enforcement practices and accountability. I believe that our Chief of Police will continue to prioritize improvement within his department policies, officers' job performance, and community relations improvement. It is his job to include and keep the members of council informed on his progress in these areas. I am not aware of any of our members of council that have the education, hands-on experience, and the resources that the Chief of Police has. Let him do his job and hold him accountable. Work with him on reviewing and reforming GPD policies and procedures. That is why we pay him. Police reform resolutions. In reading the proposed resolutions addressing police department reform, I have issues with their origin. Issues such as, if I am reading them correctly, Councilwoman Salamandra has written all or most of them. She goes on as far as requesting detailed police data from 10 years ago with itemized list of incidents, list of 911 calls, broken down by type of call, and so on. Is there a hidden agenda that requires this information? How is this information, from as far back as 10 years ago, going to assist with any proposed police reform moving forward? I would also add that Councilwoman Salamandra's outspoken contempt of our police officers documented on social media clouds her ability to be open-minded to any police reform proposals unless those proposals align with her personal motives. How many members of council polled your wards to see where the voters stand on Geneva Police Department reform? Not the national issue, but our community issues. When was the last time you polled the majority of voters within your ward to see what they thought about issues you were voting on? My perception is that your vote on important issues may be based on your own personal agenda and not necessarily what the voters that you represent favor. If I'm wrong, then show voters the documented data showing their support and how you voted on important issues such as budget and police reform. For example, council members were advocates to join the 911 system, but I missed a report showing voters how this benefited our community. What was the final number of Geneva taxpayers' votes in favor of joining 911 system? What was the final cost to the city for its implementation? What is the cost of maintaining and updating the system? How much money did this save our city and improve our budget at the time and moving forward? How did this improve or reduce our GPD, EMS, ambulance, and GFD response time versus old system? I may have missed it, but if available, I'd like to see that data. Maybe it's time council members get out and talk to folks you represent before you make decisions that directly affect our family's safety and well-being. City council reform. While you're working on GPD reform, I see a Hugh needs to discuss and implement city council reform. You could start with your present code of conduct and members of council accountability, along with city council code of ethics on your reform platform. For example, recently you held a senior councilman accountable for his actions, but excused another councilman's ethical violation because he is a new member of council and didn't know better. What message are you sending? You have a first-year council person that continues to perform unprofessionally and unethically, and they get the free pass because they are new. You let one member of council promote violence in our community, but it's okay that the person is new. I recommend that council holds each other accountable to present themselves with professionalism and dignity, both in council and in the community. In closing, for years I have sat back and I went about my business, not paying much attention to our council's efforts and performance. I was a typical voter, complaining about the state of the city from the sideline, but not wanting to get in the game. I would like to be considered to work on any committee working toward or improving any of the issues I presented tonight. I was this typical voter, convincing myself that my vote doesn't matter. I was wrong. Every vote counts. Every opinion counts. Every person counts. Thank you for your time. Respectfully submitted, Peter Gelati.
For the record, Laura Salamandra had nothing to do with writing any of our resolutions, but we appreciate his comments.
Okay, this comment is from Irene Rodriguez, 222 William Street. I would like to voice my support for the people's peaceful protest. I am grateful for the work they have done and will continue to do for our community. I urge all councilors to vote yes for the 9 resolutions being read by Councilor Salamandra this evening. And
Okay,
the next 3, I have Thomas Lloyd Jones, Brian Russ Jr., and Colin Hennessy. And I will be reading Colin's comment.
Okay, Brian Ross Jr., please.
I'm sorry, Thomas Lloyd Jones first.
Let's skip to him. I'm sorry. Thomas Lloyd Jones. I'm sorry I passed you there.
No worries. Good afternoon, guys. Hello, everyone. So I've been listening to a lot of the conversation tonight, and it's frankly hilarious. Honestly, what really concerns me the most is that we're paying attention to the 4 people out of all the people we've had tonight. 4 people have said either hold on or no, and only 2 of those actually said no. One of them gave no reasoning whatsoever. One of them, which Frank just read, was extremely bad logic. And the other 2 said, hold on a second, which was the NAACP, which I frankly don't agree with. Like, why would you hold on when what you want is to advance? You don't want to stop. Okay, so let's get into it then. Let's get into the real subject matter. So the real question is, why can't we reduce police spending? If we're spending roughly, I have the budget up right next to me, sorry. We're spending roughly about $100,000 in total under public partner agencies. If we were to raise that by another 150,000 instead of giving that to the police, which they have proposed for, then we would be instead giving our young citizens something to do. In a place like Geneva, out here in the middle of nowhere, I grew up in the city, so I know this for a fact. There's nothing to do here. In comparison to a city, you've got nothing, right? So the city of Geneva is very small. It needs something for its children to do. It needs something for its teenagers to do. Otherwise, they're going to find something else to do. And it's going to be things that, frankly, as older people won't like. So why not give them something else to do? Why not put more public funding into the actual public uses that we can actually use, rather than focusing on the police department and punishing the people for having nothing to do? I find it extremely aggravating that we are constantly putting more money into the police department and constantly taking money out of the funding for other places, such as the YMCA is only getting the same amount of money they get last year. And that's not even including the fact that their spending would have gone up. Interest is real. On top of that, Boys and Girls Club, is getting 3,000 less than last year. That's huge. Boys and Girls Club, they're the ones who actually go out, help meals, give families things to do. They do a lot of things for the community. And the fact that we are not just avoiding giving them money, but also giving it to the people who punish people instead. The police should be there to protect us, not punish us. Simple. And that's it.
Thomas, I just wanted to let you know that I had responded to your emails, but they came back. So I'm not sure if there's something wrong with your email, but I did try to respond to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laurie. Sorry about that.
Welcome. No problem.
Okay, who we got next, Lori?
We have Brian Russ Jr. Thought I saw him on earlier. Brian, are you there? You're muted if you're on, Brian. Brian, did you want to speak? You're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Brian Russ Jr. I'm 26 years old. I work through all throughout the Finger Lakes. I'm a private contractor. I was born and raised in Geneva. And when I was 6 years old, I wanted to be a cop. And so sorry about that. I wanted to be a cop because I thought that their gun was cool when they showed it to me. And now that I'm grown and conscientious, I realize that there's nothing really cool about having to defend yourself, because that's what guns are for. They're for self-protection and self-defending. And now that I realize that, and then when I was 12 years old, that same cop that made me want to be a cop told me that he couldn't wait until I turned 16 so he could arrest me. And I felt a deep level of distrust, and I felt betrayed. And every moment thereafter that was a negative light just added to the distrust. And there was many incidents thereafter. And now I'm here, and I know that there's good cops out there, and I'm not denying that fact, but there shouldn't be any bad cops. There shouldn't be any bad cops, and they especially shouldn't be allowed to run rogue and without repercussions. And it seems like more often that they're even rewarded, because I've looked at records and I've studied the things that happened, the reports that have been made, and it seems like after the fact of these reports being made, they're being given more money. And that just doesn't make sense to me. And also I just wanted to comment about my first time that I ever seen a gun was in school from the school resource officer. So that's all I wanted to say. And I just wanted to say that's my part. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate every one of you.
Thank you, Brian.
Moving along.
This is a statement from Colin Hennessy. He says, "My name is Colin Hennessy. I reside in the city of Geneva at 83 North Genesee Street, Apartment 2, which is located in the 4th Ward. My phone number is 315-878-3140. My public comment is that I believe dashboard-mounted cameras that record what is happening directly in front of the vehicle should be installed in all vehicles used by on-duty Geneva police officers. I also believe that any and all complaints filed against Geneva police officers, regardless of whether or not they are forwarded to the Geneva Police Department's Internal Affairs Division, be posted on the City of Geneva's website, at least until the question of whether or not the Police Accountability Board that was discussed at the June 29, 2020 meeting will be formed, and whether or not it would have disciplinary powers. I believe a brief description of the complaints the date of the incident being complained about allegedly happened, the street where the incident allegedly happened, and the officers who were allegedly involved should also be published. I believe the names of people filing complaints against Geneva police officers should be redacted unless the person filing the complaint gives permission for their name to be published. I believe that these complaints should be removed from the city's website after a period of 360 days and posted no later than 24 hours after being received. I believe that this will have an overall positive effect on the community police relations by allowing residents who may have witnessed the alleged incidents to bring their stories to the attention of the chief of police, which will assist him in his investigation and his decision on whether or not to forward the complaint to internal affairs. Residents will be able to see what complaints other residents have with which officers and patterns of negative behavior will be exposed when they could have gone unnoticed by most people. Lastly, I truly believe that transparency is the key to earning trust. Thank you all for your time and consideration on these matters. Happy Independence Day, and may America forever remain blessed by Yahweh.
Okay, next three.
Then I have George Lamson, Donald McGuigan, and Daniel Steincole, and I'm going to read all three of these.
Okay, great.
Okay, this is from George Lamson. He says, as a civilian working in the Geneva City court system for 14 years, I have witnessed the police officers and how they conduct themselves. I have also witnessed the derogatory and favorable attitudes and actions directed towards them during a regular day of court. I have seen many good people, white and black, and many not so good, white and black, come through those doors to answer for a traffic ticket to a murder. I have seen them all. As an impartial citizen, I have formed my own opinion of the actions of both the police and those coming in to answer allegations for which they have been arrested for or given tickets to. As a whole, most people are respectful and cooperative. And then you have the other side, and the way some see the people, the arrogant, the disrespectful. You can figure they may be a problem when they don't acknowledge you when you say good morning, but ignore you and walk by, or the ones who question why you're checking them or asking them certain questions that we are required to ask as part of our job to make sure that both they and everyone in the courtroom are safe and protected while in the building. I myself have been disrespected and looked down on with either derogatory looks and attitudes or outright disrespectful words directed towards me. Don't get me wrong, for the most part, everyone is good, but then you have the people who just do not like you or what you represent as a person working in that building. In my opinion, many of these people are the ones pushing the accountability and integrity of the Geneva Police Force at this time and using the unfortunate death of George Floyd to do so. I stated a few instances in this letter, but I could state many more. Mr. Peeler, I voted for you to represent me and my family and be a positive voice in the city for the better of this city and its law-abiding citizens. What is happening in the city right now is not positive. Members of the council should take a really close look at what is taking place here, because the end result of what you are looking at before you is going to impact your children and all the innocent young generation of this and every other city in America. You really should look closely at what is before you, or it will play right into the hands of all those who are not and have been for quite some time disrespecting the police and the decent people of Geneva. Let's get one thing straight. No matter what your color, race, or religion, we all are subject to obey the law. I have worked in the city court system for 14 years as security. During that time, I have seen all who have come before the court for all types of violent crimes and many other not so violent. Most people who come through these doors to answer for their wrongdoings are humble and just want to get their situation behind them. They, and when I say they, I mean black and white, they are polite and respectful to the officers, court people, and all in general. I can't begin to tell you how many black and white individuals from the past who were arrested for by some of the retired officers working the security there now, praised them for their help when they were arrested from years back, and how they now say how stupid they were back when they were repeatedly arrested. They themselves cannot believe the disrespect shown by black and white for the police officers here in Geneva and the laws we are all supposed to obey. Maybe you remember a couple of years back when the two brothers were charged for inciting a riot and fighting on Main Street. The local paper, Geneva Believer, and others joined in their constant effort
to accuse and nail the police once again. I was there when the mother of those two screamed at Lieutenant that he was a racist pig over and over again on her way out the door. News crews showed up and took statements from the mother and the former group defending the young man and their unjust treatment. This is the group that started to protest in court and on the street the unjust and racist treatment handed out by the Geneva Police Department. They even had shirts made with a saying of something that stated the injustice these two innocent kids were being given and how racist it was. A few weeks into the back and forth of these two innocent kids' time at court with the group of social injustice fanatics following demanding justice for them, the same two were arrested for robbing an individual at gunpoint here in the city. So much for that racist act by the police against these innocent young men. The movement probably put their shirts in storage for the next victim of the injustice. That is just one case in which there are many, many more instances of Black and white of disrespect to the officers, myself, and the court that have taken place. One of the current city councilors continues to demonstrate a distaste for the law and has shown countless instances of disrespect for authority. From instances in the courtroom where I have witnessed her removal due to her derogatory comments, to leading the current protests and calling for the defunding of police, she continues to not hold herself at a higher standard, despite the office she holds. It is clear that she is on council to push her and her group's agenda and not represent all residents of the Fifth Ward, which is what she was elected to do. To top it all off, she doesn't even stand for the pledge because in her own words in a newspaper article, she defended her right not to stand and stated that it is not for anything that the flag, she is not for anything that the flag represents and has felt that way most of her life. I ask you that you keep in mind that things go on in the city that you and your members have no idea take place on a daily basis and what the police put up with and have to endure every day. I thank you for taking the time to hear me out, and I hope you take these comments just as equally as the negative ones put out every day towards the Geneva Police Department and its officers. Thank you.
Good job, Lori. Next.
Next one is Donald McGuigan. Geneva City Council. My name is Donald McGuigan, residing at 45 High Street, a lifelong resident, business owner, and a business owner that was established in 1947 and a taxpayer. First of all, you have to find a way to get back to having meetings in person instead of Zoom meetings. It could be done very safely with all the precautions needed if done in a large venue, which could allow for social distancing. The governor has issued an order that the city must adopt a police reform plan by 2021. In his words, by getting together members of the community, sitting down and talking over ideas. Doesn't sound like a bad idea. I even emailed the city manager and expressed my hope that a committee could be made up with residents from the entire city, not just anti-police people with an agenda. The mayor wants input from the police department, NAACP, which is a well-established organization in the city with respected leaders, and the community compact. It appears from recent activities, some people can't sit down and have a conversation with the police chief without yelling and calling him names and then leaving. That type of behavior is happening way too much across the country and should not happen here in Geneva, where someone says something you don't like, they get up, shout, they get shot down, and the narrative is changed. I urge the city to create a committee of city residents who can sit down together and talk over things, come up with ideas, and plan peacefully. It would appear to the average person that Councilor Salamander has created a one-person committee, being herself with the assistance from People's Peaceful Protest, with associates from social media. Talk about getting the cart before the horse. This is exactly what is happening with her 9 resolutions. Resolution number 3 is so ridiculous it's scary. To expect a police officer on duty to be unarmed, no handcuffs, by the way, which he is needed to use several times in the schools. Ordering a police officer to report for work unarmed is so unsafe to the officer and the public. Any elected official supporting that concept should not be in office. Public security is the foundation of government which ensures the protection of its citizens. The article in the paper stated that reform was initiated after the death, which was a disgusting murder, of George Floyd. Councilor Salamander's hatred and anti-police sentiment towards the police and wanting the department cut has been going on since the start. Even during the meetings when the subject was not related to police, she has been heard blurting out, "Cut the police." She states the majority of her residents in Ward 5 agree with her. I believe the majority of law-abiding residents do not agree with her on her actions. One last comment, counselors seem to use the word offensive a lot and recently found the Blue Lives Matter sign in front of the public safety building offensive, and it was taken down. Myself and several people find a lot of signs and things that she says offensive. We are told that's her right and we have to deal with it. It appears to be a double standard here. The people have to deal with offensive things, but the counselor doesn't have to. And this is from Daniel Steinkohl. He says, increasing funding by adding 25% to the police budget this year and every year with funds generated from sales tax is a gesture of social justice. All of us, our children and our parents, deserve to have our individual and our property rights protected at all times. Next, we have Karen Springmeyer, Cynthia Williams, and Michael Mills of the Geneva Bid. And I will be reading Karen and Michael Mills.
Thank you.
Karen says, please know that I am not opposed to police reform and police policies. What has happened in this country is unacceptable and demands change. I am opposed to resolutions that are not inclusive, as one of my colleagues said it better than me. The part that I don't get is how one organization can write the proposals for the city to vote on. There should be time for other parties to be involved, negotiations, discussions, etc. The People's Peaceful Protest doesn't get to be the only ones at the table, as this is a citywide issue with ramifications for us all. I did read their proposals, and some of them make perfect sense to me, but it is a process. Where is the NAACP, for example, in this process? We all agree that reform is needed, but it has to be from a diverse group. Have the counselors asked their constituents, and has anyone asked the students at Geneva High School how they feel? And then Cynthia Williams will speak on her own behalf.
Thank you. Cynthia?
Am I unmuted now?
Yes, you are.
Great, thank you. Good, thank you so much for this. I speak in support of the well-researched resolutions brought forth by the People's Peaceful Protest of Geneva. I will not go through all of them as they've been very well discussed so far. These are common sense reforms aimed at improving community relations and beginning to address the history and weight of systemic racism and the horrendous effect that systemic racism and its policy has had on our Geneva residents, especially our Black and Brown community members. These reforms are not a condemnation of any particular individual in the Geneva Police Department, but rather an acknowledgement that the GPD is not immune to the pervasive climate of racism and white privilege that affects us all. We must do better in providing a safe and equitable environment for our whole community. As a white person, I am doing everything I can to learn how my unearned privilege has granted me rights and opportunities denied others because of their skin color. In the words of Ibram Kendi from his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, he writes, "What's the problem with being not racist? It's a claim that signifies neutrality. I'm not a racist, but neither am I aggressively against racism. But there is no neutrality in the racism struggle. The opposite of racist isn't not racist. It is anti-racist. What's the difference? One endorses either the idea of racial hierarchy as a racist or racial inequality as an anti-racist. One either believes that problems are rooted in groups of people as a racist, or locates the roots of problems in power and policies as an anti-racist. One either allows racial inequalities to persevere as a racist, or confronts racial inequalities as an anti-racist. There is no safe space of not racist. I am calling on the mayor and city councilors to move from the comfortable space of not racist by voting for these resolutions. I want them to move toward the actions and policies of leaders who are anti-racist. Please join me in this struggle. And I would point out that the people's protest is not a one agenda item. It is not one person. It is not one council member. It is a number of people, as you heard Adam explain. It is a number of people who have been working for a long time on these issues. And to label it as something that, well, it's just, a few people who have these outrageous ideas, they are asking for a community conversation. We owe ourselves that community conversation. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
Lori.
you, Cynthia. Mayor, the letter from the bid is about the chicken keeping ordinance. Did we want to hold this until next time, or should I just go ahead and read it?
Well, it's going to be on our agenda later, so might as well
Okay.
read it.
Okay, this is from the bid and Michael Mills, the executive director. He says, Mayor Valentino and members of the Geneva City Council, the following letter is correspondence from the Geneva Business Improvement District regarding recent discussions of code modifications related to live chickens and other livestock residing within the city limits. Geneva Bid Board directors took up the issue at our most recent meeting, June 25th, 2020, and voted unanimously to share the following statement in opposition to the proposed plans. The Geneva bid opposes the possession or housing of live chickens, roosters, or other designated livestock within the downtown business district. The board did not make and does not hold a position on the benefits or negatives associated with individual ownership of urban livestock, and the board did not take and does not hold a position on their validity in other districts within the city of Geneva. However, the board does believe that the possession and housing of livestock is inappropriate and incompatible with the residential, professional services, and merchant activity offered within the downtown business district. And we strongly encourage the Geneva City Council to oppose efforts to allow for them within the 18.5 acre designated downtown business district. Thank you for your consideration in advance, Michael Mills. Next, we have Liza Flum, Holly Manslack, and Brian Brown. And I'm going to read Liza's. This is from Liza Flum. She says, I want to thank the council members who have supported the People's Peaceful Protest resolutions for police reform, and I want to urge all our elected officials to join them. I'm a young professional who moved across the country to settle in Geneva. This is a place I choose to live because of its welcoming community. After listening to my neighbors, I have learned that the behavior of our police department does not reflect the community I've come to love. I was horrified to learn about the killing of Corey Jackson in 2011 and shocked to learn of the many documented incidences since then when police have acted abusively. Not enough has changed. This is not a police department that is keeping our community safe. We need to pass these resolutions and ensure that our police department does its job of protecting our community. And then Holly was going to speak. Are you there, Holly?
Yep, I'm right here.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay. Good evening. My name is Holly Manslank. I was born and raised here in Geneva, and I am also a current resident. I graduated from Cornell University, and I'm a member of Mensa, and I am also the sister of Adam Fryer. I want to thank Mayor Valentino and the City Council for your service to our community, and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. History has borne out the undeniable truth that when societies encounter times as divisive as now, it is impossible to govern to the satisfaction of 100% of the people. Our founding fathers understood this undeniable truth and so created a system of government driven by a consensus of the majority. As duly elected servants of our community, it is your job to acknowledge the will of the majority and govern appropriately. A call for change to the status quo will always be met with opposition. Change can be, as we all know, difficult to accept. However, this call for change comes to us not just from our community, but from all parts of the world. Now is the time for Geneva to answer this call for change, beginning with police reform. While I myself have never had a negative experience with Geneva's police force, I know this is not true for all members of our community. It makes me sad that citizens of my hometown have been mistreated by its police force. It makes me angry on behalf of those citizens. And it makes me want change that will allow all of our citizens to experience the best of what Geneva can offer. This is not the time for hesitation and reflection. This is not just a matter of Black against white. As you can see, I am not Black. This is the time to answer to the will of the majority, locally, nationally, globally. And this is a matter of making our community feel heard, feel whole, and feel safe for everyone. To specific council members, I would like to state the call for change to happen now is not negotiable. The specific methods for this change are, of course, negotiable, but only so far as the negotiations end in addressing the will of the majority. So I come to you tonight as a member of our community, as a supporter of the people's peaceful protest, and as a part of the majority who support the 9 resolutions put forth and presented to you by Adam Pryor calling for change in Geneva. I believe that once these resolutions are passed and put into practice, any confusion regarding them will soon disappear as they are shown to be a benefit to all community members. Continuing to discuss them only serves to delay changes that are long overdue. I ask that you vote to pass these resolutions so that our community can start the process of accepting this global call for change, healing old wounds of social injustice, and grieving what was, if necessary. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Holly. And I will read Brian Brown's comments.
Thank you.
This is from Brian Brown. He says, as a Geneva taxpayer and resident of Ward 4, I strongly urge you to adopt the resolutions put forward by the People's Peaceful Protest. The Geneva Police Department currently wields incredible power. That power is in need of more objective oversight to ensure it is used appropriately. Thank you, Brian Brown. Next, we have Fred Brockway, Marilla Gonzalez, and Catherine Slining Haynes. Fred, are you on?
Anybody see Fred? So there's phone numbers, so it's hard to tell if everybody's on, but
I'll keep looking, Lori, and you can.
Okay.
Yeah, see if you can find them.
Okay. And then I have comments for Marilla Gonzalez. She says, good afternoon. I would like to express my support for the Geneva City Council resolution proposed by the People's Peaceful Protest. I have been watching them develop these resolutions, and as a community member, I feel they are well articulated and thought out. It's encouraging that so many in and out of City Council have been able to keep a level head and recognize that these points are rational and reasonable changes for our community and the police department. After carefully weighing the resolutions, I feel that they would benefit not only the people of Geneva, but also the police department. I think these provide for better care for our officers through the whistleblower protection policy and a police accountability board, and for our citizens with things like the budget advisory board and better reporting of Geneva Police Department data metrics. I would like to keep this brief for those reading, so I will close with this. The people organizing these protests and calling for reform are not perfect, of course. They are regular members of the community that we all know and coexist with every day. I hope the individuals responsible for voting will rise above the emotions, heated arguments, and politics surrounding this issue and come together so we can move forward to meaningful change. These are not drastic changes that are being asked for, but this decision will speak volumes to our ability as a city to work together and improve ourselves. Thank you for your time and for serving this wonderful city. And then for Catherine signing Haynes, I will read hers. Okay. She says, my name is Catherine Slining Haynes, and I live at 11 Madison Street here in Geneva. I have written and rewritten these comments several times in my head. What I want to say has evolved as events have unfolded. First off, Black Lives Matter, and I am in support of the resolution being brought forward by Councilwoman Salamandra. I have been extremely impressed by the degree to which Black Lives Matter peaceful protest has been disciplined, powerful, and heartfelt. They do Geneva proud, and I hope we make space for this young generation. I was also pleased to see that our police department did not engage in some of the tactics used by police in other cities when encountering Black Lives Matter protests. I can understand that some of the resolutions could be experienced as challenging to police personnel. It is not easy to have one's work criticized and I get that. However, I am extremely disappointed that some individuals have resorted to fear tactics and misleading information regarding the content of the resolutions. I encourage all Genevans to really read these resolutions. They are not outlandish, but reasoned and well thought through. They also provide the police the opportunity for greater transparency, which in and of itself can help build trust and illuminate areas for improvement. Like the rest of the country, Geneva has to deal with its own history of structural racism. These are difficult discussions. However, it has been 9 years since Corey Jackson was killed, and problems of over-policing of certain neighborhoods continues, and issues of racist activities and extreme force continue to arise. Reviewing and updating policies, providing data to the public, establishing a civilian review board, revisiting the role of police in our public schools, as well as in the areas of substance abuse and mental health, provide us as a community the opportunity to re-examine how we choose to establish safety for all Genevans, regardless of age, race, gender preference, or any other quality that makes each and every one of us both unique and special. After all, we essentially hire the police and pay for them with our taxes. All businesses review budget priorities, effectiveness of operations, and whether goals remain relevant. The City of Geneva is no different. Our comprehensive plan states that our diversity is one of our assets. Those are empty words if we don't put in place policies that actualize that assertion.
Okay. Lori, how are we doing with how many left?
I'm on number 43.
Out of 50?
Yep.
Thank you very much.
I have Greg Frost Arnold, James McCorkle, and Ricky Price. And Greg and James are both going to speak on their own behalf.
Okay.
Hi, thanks. I'm Greg. So there's a lot. I'm a Ward 3 resident. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. There are lots of big important questions to discuss about the issue of policing in Geneva. But I want to talk about one specific narrow point, a point about the city attorney's June 29th memo. And it's a topic that Michael Salato mentioned earlier this evening. At the very end of that memo, in the conclusion section, the city attorney says that, quote, adopting police reform and accountability measures without consultation with the stakeholders would violate Governor Cuomo's executive order, unquote. So if I were a city councilor reading that, I'd think, oh, okay, we have to put off voting on the resolutions from the people's peaceful protest until after we've done substantive consultation with stakeholders, or else we'll be in violation of that executive order from the governor. So the point I want to talk about is I think that's incorrect. I am pretty sure that voting on the people's peaceful protest resolutions today would not violate Governor Cuomo's executive order. So the executive order is short, and you can read it for yourself if you want. Hopefully, the version of the city attorney's memo that's posted on the city website has the order as an appendix at the end. It's pages 13 and 14 of the PDF if you want to check for yourself. So what the relevant bit of the executive order says is that every local government in New York State with a police agency, like Geneva, quote, must perform a comprehensive review of current police force policies, procedures, and regulations. Then, after saying everybody's got to do a comprehensive review, the order goes on to describe what the comprehensive review should look like. And within the context of everybody having to do a comprehensive review, one of the requirements is that this review has to include consultation with stakeholders in the community and the chief of police. So here's the key thing. The part of the executive order that mandates consultation with stakeholders only applies to the comprehensive review, not to any individual resolution a local government might pass. But putting the resolutions from the people's peaceful protest up for a vote tonight is not the same thing as a comprehensive review of policing in Geneva. I mean, many of the resolutions are to establish a comprehensive review. The resolutions are important, but they are just not the same thing as a comprehensive review. So when the executive order is talking about requirements to consult with stakeholders, that requirement does not apply to voting on the resolutions. So that's why I say that voting on these resolutions tonight does not violate the governor's executive order. So in short, the big picture takeaway is this. If you wanted to postpone voting on these resolutions, you cannot use the governor's executive order to justify delaying the vote. Why? That executive order only applies to comprehensive reviews, and these resolutions just aren't a comprehensive review. Thanks for your time, and thanks for your work to help create a better Geneva.
Thank you, Greg.
Lori, I found Fred Brockway. If I can mute him and ask and get
Got
him
it.
going, he should be here in just.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Fred.
Thank you. Sorry for the delay. I endorse all of those who have supported the efforts of the people's peaceful protest. However, I want to address the issue of the coronavirus from a very different perspective. It has created two major issues for Geneva. The one, to create police reform, which will save lives. The second, to establish and create a balanced budget to save money. So my sense of the coronavirus is something that has hit humanity with such a magnitude that we have never experienced before. It has confronted human intelligence with such an assault that we have never known. The virus itself has killed what could not be sustained. We are in mourning and we are in grief because we've lost a way of life. The old normal is dead and cannot be revived. Why? Because the near universal disregard for our planet as the source of all life echoes the words, I cannot breathe. Any effort even to bring back what was or what used to be, the collective voice of the world will say, we cannot breathe. So in this context, I have the suggestion of a new metric by which we can judge the value of human life. I call it the heart metric. The heart metric. It's that organ in the center of your chest that will register what is right and true as you make decisions. We're used to using data and information that is collected, but the only metric will tell us the whole truth and deliver the whole truth to our community is the heart in the center of your chest. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Fred. Next, we have James McCorkle.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. I'm going to start with I live on South Main Street and I teach in the Africana Studies program at Hobart William Smith. I'm going to start with just a short reflection. Tomorrow, Medgar Evers would be 95. Tomorrow would be his birthday. He was shot by a white supremacist at his front door. So I'd like to register my full support for the petition circulated by the People's Peaceful Protest of Geneva, proposing a set of common sense reforms to the Geneva Police Department. These reforms are further articulated in the resolutions 2820 through 3820 in tonight's new business. These reforms, of which a robust police accountability board, civilian review board, a police budget oversight committee, and the timely and full account of reports and actions by the police department are most essential and will go far to instill trust and support of the Geneva Police Department across all of Geneva's population. The goal is to create a department that will have a continuity of humane, just, and equitable practices that are institutional rather than followed by some and not all. I urge the council to consider where the very limited resources of the city must be allocated. As you establish the PABCRB, you must consider the size of the department compared to other small upstate New York cities. We all value peace and security. The question really is the means of securing peace. Peace cannot be enforced. Rather, peace, if that is what we as a community desire, is only approached through modeled practice, the modeled practice of empathy. Does the city actually provide models for this? If we look at the economic values, we see certain items always the first to be cut or eliminated, and others, such as the police department, left largely untouched. The police department needs to be reimagined so that the funds can be reallocated to areas that are more efficacious in solving the needs of the city's citizens. These proposals reimagine the police in Geneva as part of a public safety umbrella that includes food and housing security, public education and recreational resources, and sustained concern for the environments of the elderly and the young. This does not come out of left field. It is not just because of the lynching of George Floyd or Trayvon Martin or Sandra Bland, or of Sam Hose or Mary Turner or John Evans. Or look over at Rose Hill Mansion and remember that the fields behind it were once tilled by enslaved Africans brought up from Virginia. This history repeats itself in the murder of Corey Jackson or across the nation, where the disastrous effects of no-knock warrants are more of a tactic of a police state than a democracy, to the very idea of the economic chokehold of the carceral prison industrial complex that is on our culture. To ignore this history is irresponsible. We do not have time. Go slow is what we've been telling Black folk for over 200 years. That is the most insidious form of institutional racism. That is why, according to a Northwestern University study, Black folks have a penny for every dollar of wealth a white person has. A penny for every dollar of wealth a white person has. In Boston, a Black family has $8 of accumulated wealth compared to a white family's $240,000 of wealth. We don't have time to go slow. By April 2021, the governor's executive order, as many have already stated, cites that cities in New York State must have enacted plans for comprehensive police reform. The petition brought forward by the People's Peaceful Protest of Geneva, and again, we should be praising the engagement of these young people, citizens of Geneva, graduates of our schools who stepped up where no other group or set of folks dared, provides you with a guide to a focused conversation and set of solutions. A focused conversation and set of solutions. Be on the side of history that is not shameful. Think about Medgar Evers. Vote in favor of the immediate implementation of the petition presented by the People's Peaceful Protest of Geneva and as reflected in the resolutions 28 through 38 presented tonight. Failing to do so means, to me and many others, you are abdicating responsibility for the very well-being of Geneva's citizens. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, James. I'm going to read the one for Ricky Price. He says his name is Ricky Price, PhD. He's a political scientist and he works in Geneva.
He says, I write in strong support of all the proposed resolutions, in particular in support of the creation of a police accountability board that has the capacity to discipline officers like the Police Accountability Board in Rochester. This is fundamentally an issue of community safety. This is painted in a partisan lens, as is everything in our politics today. But safety is not a zero-sum game. No part of the community is safe if another part feels threatened. As a trained researcher, I want to point the council towards actual data regarding community safety and policing. I want to plead with you all to use real data and the experience of your constituents rather than the political talking points of your national political party. The creation of mechanisms to hold police behavior accountable is central to community safety and police safety. The nonpartisan Pew Research Center surveyed police officers in 2016 and found that 86% of police officers felt that their jobs were made more difficult because of fatal encounters between Black people and the police. The lack of accountability and no mechanism for self-accountability means that without accountability and justice, police too are made unsafe by our current policies. An accountability board would increase trust between the community and the police if a fair process is set up to deal with claims of violence, brutality, and general unlawfulness. Furthermore, the FBI notes in the Law Enforcement Officers Killed and Assaulted database that in 2019, 48 officers were killed by a felonious act, i.e. killed on duty, and that most of those attacks on police officers were perpetrated by white offenders with guns. The report also notes that from 2010 to 2019, 56% of perpetrators of attacks on police officers were white. So if you really want to tackle public safety in Geneva for both the police and the residents, some things become clear from nonpartisan data and from this institutional data from the FBI. The danger facing police is not Black and brown communities, but from white men who own guns. A police accountability board is not an issue of community safety versus police safety. There are not two sides to that issue. Distrust from the community and verifiable police violence that happens right here in Geneva, and we need a mechanism to deal with those contestations. The Police Accountability Board and these resolutions are the first step. I urge you on the council to use the power the people have granted you through our electoral process to move the city towards justice. Next I have Hannah Dickinson, Rebecca Burdett, and Maria Carlo. And Hannah wanted to speak on her own behalf.
Okay, just a reminder, let's keep them to 3 minutes, please.
Hannah, are you there?
I see her.
My name is Hannah Dickinson. I live in Ward 4. And I want to speak in favor of the resolutions brought by the People's Peaceful Protest and want to focus particularly on the resolution that would begin a conversation about a police accountability board, calling for a public hearing. I moved to Geneva 9 years ago. I know for some of you that doesn't seem like a long time, but I have committed myself to learning more about this community and connecting with people in this community from a variety of backgrounds. I've been a part of conversations through Tools for Social Change, trainings by the NAACP, Ontario County Justice Coalition, and attended a whole host of community meetings focused on policing over the last 9 years. One of the trends in those conversations has been the call from people to begin a conversation about a police accountability board. Early in my 9 years here, the answer from Chief Trickler, when groups who had well-researched information to bring to bear about the value of a police accountability board was, I don't believe we need one. When asked why, the answer was, well, because I keep an eye on things. When Chief Pasalacqua took over as chief and engaged in a whole variety of community meetings before his tenure and immediately thereafter, the answer was the same. I don't believe we need a police accountability board because I'm here watching over things. What the People's Peaceful Protest is asking for is to move the conversation past the moment when the chief of police says, we don't need a police accountability board because we can police ourselves. There are young people every single day out in the streets, every single day meeting with each other, every single day reaching out to experts in our own city and other cities, every single day talking to their neighbors. And what they are saying is not even that we want a police accountability board now. What they are saying is, please help us start the conversation that this city has not been able to follow through on for at least 9 years. Before I end my comments, I also want to speak in favor of Resolution 28 brought by Councilors Camera and Pruitt. This resolution asks, in a moment of economic crisis and a pandemic, that a mere $52,000 be moved from the police budget. The police have a budget of over $3.5 million. Taking $52,000 out would still make it a police budget over $3.5 million. And I would ask this council consider that just $8,000 of that could be granted to the incredible organizations like the Boys and Girls Club and Center for Concern, working every day in the city to feed people out every day, feeding people who otherwise would not be able to eat in an economic crisis. This council refused to consider even a mere $8,000 for those people who are hungry. Please, let's take seriously our priorities here. No one's asking to defund the police. All people are asking, not the People's People Protest, in this case, Councilor Pruitt and Camera, all they're asking is for common sense, attention to budget in the midst of a true economic crisis. Thank you.
Anna. I'm going to read the comment for Rebecca Burdett. Dear members of Geneva City Council, my name is Rebecca Burdett and I have been a resident of Geneva for 6 years. I'm writing tonight with my full support for the resolutions presented by the People's Peaceful Protest of Geneva. Over the past few weeks, this group of committed citizens has worked tirelessly to educate the community, to provide support during a moment of national crisis, and to peacefully call for change. The resolutions they propose tonight reflect their commitment to making our city a more just and safe place for everyone. The resolutions are not meant to punish or stifle law enforcement. Instead, they seek to make our institutions more transparent and accountable. The resolutions do not argue for the complete dissolution of the Geneva Police Force, nor do they demand major funding cuts. To my mind, the People's Peaceful Protest is asking that Geneva adopt the basic tenets of a democratic society, a civilian review board, bans on excessive force, and new diversity standards. Such reforms are not radical. They are wholly consistent with the Community Compact as well as state legislation. Most importantly, they ensure the basic dignity and safety of all people. I cannot imagine that anyone from our community would be opposed to that. Thank you for listening.